Operation Northwoods, should it have gone forward, would have been a project that saw violence committed against US and Cuban civilians, with the blame placed on the Cuban government. Messed up, right? These acts would include fake attacks of high magnitude, the hijacking of planes, the sinking of boats, like some really serious stuff. Basically, they just wanted to harm themselves just to place the blame on Cuba, and they wanted to do this in order to justify an all-out war with Cuba, but thankfully some people at the time had decided that this likely wasn't the smartest or the best route to take, and the idea was scrapped. For a long time this was hidden from the public until years later documents were revealed that showed this very dark truth. On August 15, 1943, Allied military forces landed on the island with the aim to eliminate the Imperial Japanese forces that had occupied the island since June 1942. Unbeknownst to the Allied forces, however, the Japanese forces had secretly abandoned the island 2 weeks earlier under the cover of thick fog using submarines and ships. So basically what I'm saying is that when the Allied forces landed here, they were unopposed. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean that no one lost their lives. There were around 313 casualties, which were a result of stray Japanese landmines, vehicle accidents, and a series of friendly fire incidents. Most of the friendly fire incidents were between Canadian and American troops as they mistook each other for Japanese forces as they came from opposite sides of the island. In our number 8 spot today we have rabbit telepathy. This is an experiment that was originally conducted after World War II but wasn't brought to light until many years later, well into the 2000s. Said to have been a part of, quote, Soviet and Czechoslovakian parapsychology research that was done from the end of World War II through to the Cold War era, this is one of the most grisly and truly unbelievable experiments that were conducted. Basically, they were trying to use rabbits to communicate with submarines, which is just already a bizarre kind of concept on a regular level, but of course the way in which they conducted this experiment was wrong and inhumane and truly just very cruel. Just a little heads up, if you're sensitive to animal stuff, I would maybe just skip over this one. You know, I wanna be safe, okay? So for the test, they would take a mother rabbit who had recently just had bunnies. They would keep the mother in a lab on shore, and then they would take the bunnies down with them in the submarine. Slowly, one by one, they would take the life of the bunnies, and each time they did, the mother rabbit's brain would produce a detectable and recordable reaction. Is this one of the worst things I've ever heard? Yes. What's even worse is that the report then goes on to say that other examples of, quote, animal telepathy research continued into the 1970s, and that it included other animals such as dogs, bears, birds, insects, and fish. I can't imagine they were, but let's just hope that these other tests weren't quite so cruel and inhumane. In our number 7 spot today we have Operation LAC. Operation LAC, which is short for Large Area Coverage, was a Cold War era project that involved the US Army Chemical Corps. Basically, it was a test that was designed to see whether or not it would be possible or feasible to taint a large area by dropping chemical agents from planes. To test this idea, they dropped, quote, a myriad of microscopic particles from planes covering an area that is said to span from the Rockies to the Atlantic, from Canada to the Gulf of Mexico. So yes, definitely a large area indeed. In fact, it was so large that this is actually the largest test that the Chemical Corps had ever undertaken. According to the declassified documents relating to this operation, the tests, quote, did not provide the Corps with nearly as much data as the Corps would like. And then it goes on to say that, quote, to obtain additional data, the Corps planned further tests for the next fiscal year. Okay, well that's a little daunting. While not necessarily the same operation, also in the Cold War era was a similar test conducted that targeted a neighborhood in St. Louis, Missouri. This test saw the area being sprayed with zinc cadmium sulfide. At the time, those local to the area were being told that, quote, the government was testing a smokescreen that could shield St. Louis from aerial observation in case the Russians attacked. But of course, decades later, documents revealed that the tests were actually a part of a biological weapons program. And to make matters even worse, the zinc cadmium sulfide was linked to an increase in cancer among the residents of the neighborhood. In our number 6 spot today we have the embassy missions. This is a secret that was hidden not only from the American people, but also the people that were being spied on and listened to, but it wasn't revealed until 2007 2011 when a document was leaked. This document is one that named 38 different embassies and missions that were so-called targets of US surveillance. The document didn't quite make it clear whether or not these targets were being looked into by only the NSA or if the CIA and FBI were also involved. The document described certain things like bugging fax machines with devices that allowed them to listen in on conversations, and the document also listed the names of different programs that are used within the embassies. The document showed that the embassies targeted weren't just those of countries who seemed to be enemies with the United States, and instead included places like India and Mexico, Greece, and Turkey. It appears as if the goal was to gain insider information into the diplomatic relations between the targets and the United States. The EU embassy in Washington, D.C. was one of the targets on this document, and this leak had the potential to have jeopardized one of the largest attempted free trade agreements in the world, because shortly after this all came out, negotiations were set to begin between the EU and the United States. The French president at the time made his anger about the situation very public and stated that all future negotiations will only be made under the agreement that the United States cease all unauthorized surveillance of any EU buildings or personnel. In our number 5 spot today, we have Operation Fast and Furious. No, this isn't another installment of the beloved franchise, although family is everything. This actually was a tactic that was used by the Arizona U.S. Attorney's Office and the Arizona Field Office of the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF, as they were conducting a series of sting operations from 2006 to 2011. Basically, the idea for this operation was to allow licensed firearm dealers to sell weapons to illegal buyers, hoping to track the firearms down later to Mexican drug cartel leaders so that they could then arrest them. So not only did this not lead to the results that they were hoping for, but it actually had terrible outcomes. Many of the firearms that were being tracked have been found at crime scenes on both sides of the United States-Mexico border, and one was even found at the scene where United States Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was killed. In our number 4 spot today, we have Operation Starfish Prime. This is an operation that took place in 1962, and it was a joint one between the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission and the Defense Atomic Support Agency. Basically, they detonated a thermonuclear device in the sky above the Pacific Ocean. They launched it from the Johnson Atoll using a Thor rocket, and once at an altitude of about 240 miles, they set it off, which ended up producing a yield of about 1.4 megatons. The electromagnetic pulse was so powerful and widespread that it disabled not only most of the equipment that was set up to measure it, but it also took out streetlights and caused telephone outages in Hawaii, nearly 900 miles away. The electrons released caused an aura that could be seen over most of the Pacific Ocean, and according to the documents, the quote visible phenomena due to the burst were widespread and quite intense, and apparently it was visible for days. In the end, it is said that the researchers weren't expecting such a powerful blast of electromagnetic pulse, and they were also anticipating that the electrons from the blast would get stuck in the Earth's own magnetic field for months, possibly even years, but alas, they did. This went on to create a radiation belt around the planet that eventually went on to disable at least 6 satellites, which included the world's first commercial satellite, only a few months after it was launched. The government didn't even tell AT&T what had happened until like 2005. In our number 3 spot today, we have Acoustic Kitty. Apparently, in 1967, the CIA was spending millions of dollars trying to make cats into spies. I don't know why they chose the one animal that does not care what you want it to do, but they did, and Project Acoustic Kitty was born. The project basically involved implanting electronic spy equipment into real living cats who would then be trained to basically eavesdrop on unsuspecting people. This Cold War era plan was intended to be used on those in the Soviet Union. The project had a whole slew of issues, of course, because cats can get hungry and distracted, and unfortunately the first time this plan was being tested, there was a catastrophic outcome. The project of course was cancelled, and the researchers said that they believed they could train cats to move short distances, but that quote, the environmental and security factors in using this technique in a real foreign situation forces us to conclude that for our intelligence purposes, it would not be practical. In our number 2 spot today, we have the cat drop. Not really sure why the government is obsessed with cats, but here we go. Apparently, the United States Office of Strategic Services, once upon a time, decided that the very best and most sensible way to ensure that bombs that had been dropped reached their intended naval targets was to strap them to cats and then drop them from planes. I know, it's absolutely horrific. Definitely not my plan. They thought up this strange project because for some reason they thought that the cats would just be able to avoid the water and instead direct themselves to the target. Strange in theory, catastrophic in reality. There of course is no way to prevent these animals from fainting midair, and if you were dropped from a plane suddenly with no parachute and a bomb strapped to you, you'd probably also faint, because what in the actual hell? Definitely one for the history books. We can all be thankful that this is not something that carried on for long. In our number 1 spot today we have Unit 731. The Imperial Japanese Army's Unit 731 conducted some pretty horrifying experiments during World War II that certainly are shocking to anyone who learns about them. The experiments were meant to be done as a way to prepare for biological warfare, but the process was gruesome and extremely inhumane. Different medical schools and universities provided doctors and other research staff to help conduct these experiments, and they used both prisoners and civilians as the guinea pigs for them. There were a bunch of different experiments that were conducted during this time, some of which involved injecting them with pathogens such as plague or cholera or anthrax. Others involved vivisection or operations with no anesthesia, putting them in a pressure chamber to see how much a human can withstand before bursting, or live weapons testing. It is hard to even believe that this is a real thing that happened, and we honestly can't even begin to imagine what those people were forced to face during that time. After World War II, however, the United States gave immunity to Shiro Ishii, who is the Japanese Army medical officer responsible for lethal human experimentation and biological warfare projects. Many of these experiments he conducted just to see what would happen. Why not? American scientists decided that this information would be valuable, so they decided to give him immunity in exchange for the information on chemical and biological warfare. Shiro was never tried for his crime. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot we have Europa. This is actually an icy moon that can be found floating around Jupiter, and it is one that Anonymous has pointed to as being important when it comes to our search for alien life. Europa has been a point of interest for a while after NASA's Galileo Jupiter probe in the 1990s, when it revealed an unusually warm spot in Europa's cold surface. In March of 2014, the Hubble Space Telescope detected what scientists thought might be a plume of water vapor, but the caution turned to cautious excitement and optimism in February of 2016 when the telescope caught another, much larger plume in the same spot. This has led to the creation of the Europa Clipper mission. While this mission doesn't yet have a set date, it will see an orbiter flying to Europa to fly through these plumes in an attempt to see what they are made out of, similar to Enceladus, which we talked about last time, to see if it really is holding the key to life, or maybe life itself. One of the scientists on this Clipper mission, Robert Pappalardo, explained that if there is life on Europa, it almost certainly was completely independent from the origin of life on Earth. That would mean that the origin of life must be pretty easy throughout the galaxy and beyond. In our number 9 spot today we have exoplanets. This is one of the first things that was mentioned in a 12-minute long anonymous video that was released back in 2017. Basically, they bring up the point that around 25 years ago, we didn't know that planets existed outside of our solar system. While that seems hard to believe, that is actually basically true, keeping in mind that this video was released a few years ago, in 2017. The first exoplanets, which are what planets outside of our solar system are called, were discovered in 1992, which is super recent. The video then goes on to explain that today we have found over 3,400 exoplanets that orbit other suns. This may seem redundant or unimportant, but this is a really important part of our search for alien life. With the vastness of space, there are so many places that need to be searched, more than we could possibly ever search, so we have to find some place to start, and these planets are the perfect place. It is entirely possible that alien life may thrive off of entirely different things than life as we know it. The things we need to survive might be detrimental to alien life, but how are we supposed to know that when we don't know any aliens? That is why we started our search looking for places with conditions similar to Earth, which we now call habitable planets. Part of a habitable planet's requirements is that they're orbiting a star, but that they aren't too close or too far from it, like we are with the sun. We're in the Goldilocks zone. So what the video is trying to get across is that while 25 years ago we didn't know any, we now know of thousands of planets that might be holding some kind of alien life or existence of past alien life. While we haven't found the proof just yet, we at least have a pretty stellar starting point. In our number 8 spot today we have Report 13. Okay, I've read quite a few different UFO sighting stories and stories of alleged alien abductions, and this is fully one of the most terrifying that I have ever heard of. Basically, the story starts off in March of 1956 when Air Force Sergeant Jonathan P. Lovett was assisting Major William Cunningham in the White Sands Missile Testing Grounds near Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. The pair were heading out searching for debris from a recent rocket test when Major Cunningham heard a loud scream. His first thought was that Sergeant Lovett had been bitten by a snake, so he went around to help aid his partner, and this is when he allegedly saw something he never expected. He recounted seeing the sergeant being dragged away by some long serpentine arm that had wrapped around his legs. Whatever this creature was, it was connected to a hovering silver disc that was in the air about 15 feet away. The major stood there in horror as he watched this creature and the sergeant retreat into the craft, which then rose vertically into the sky. Of course, he radioed for help, and while he was taken to the hospital for observation, search teams were sent out immediately. It wouldn't happen until 3 days later that they would find the body of Sergeant Lovett only 10 miles from the site where he was said to have disappeared from. The autopsy performed on him later also only raised more questions than answers, as his body was severely harmed. So of course there was an investigation that happened, and many people claim this investigation was detailed in a 600-page document labeled Project Grudge Report 13, but the problem with this is that no official information on Report 13 exists, and the US government denies its very existence. Though Grudge Reports 1 through 12 have been declassified along with Report 14, what they say happened. So at this point, no one has any idea what really went on here. In our number 5 spot today, we have the UFO footage part 2, alright? Because this is a part 2, so what else are we doing? We have to include just one more video of what is claimed to be proof of aliens visiting us here on Earth before we get back more into the science-y points. This is another video that was uploaded by a member of Anonymous, and it comes from 2017. The video features a dark sky, but it shows what looks like some sort of aircraft with a few flashing lights, and it seems it is able to basically just hover there. Not long after the video starts, another mysterious UFO seemingly joins the first one, and the two are just seen floating. What do you guys think these could be? I obviously don't know what an alien aircraft would look like. I mean, Jordan Peele's Nope changed everything I thought I once knew, so it's tough to say if this is a realistic example or not. All I know is that if this isn't someone playing a trick and they really saw this in the sky, I have no other possible explanations of what it could be. In our number 4 spot today, we have Titan. Many space agencies have turned their main focus on the search for extraterrestrial life, from advanced intelligent life forms to more primitive and smaller life forms, and that starts with the smallest organisms and microbes. Like I mentioned before, there are preparations being made for the mission to Europa to see what is going on underneath that icy surface, but Jupiter isn't the only one who has some interesting moons. There's another mission also in the works that is focusing on another moon that we haven't yet spoken about, and that is the moon of Saturn called Titan. In 2027, they're aiming to launch the $1 billion Dragonfly mission to this moon in order to analyze the lakes of liquid methane that exist on it. A planetary scientist at Johns Hopkins University who studies alien atmospheres named Sarah Horst has said that they believe Titan has all the ingredients necessary for life, so it certainly is a promising mission. We may have to wait until 2027, but who knows? Maybe we'll find signs even before then with all of the upcoming missions and technological advancements. In our number 3 spot today, we have Frederick Valentich. Frederick was an Australian pilot who disappeared under some unbelievably suspicious circumstances on a training flight on October 21st, 1978. During the flight, he radioed the Melbourne Air Traffic Control to let them know that he was being accompanied by an aircraft that was about 1,000 feet above him, and at the same time that his engine had begun to run roughly. Air Traffic Control responded to him by explaining that there was no known air traffic at that level, and Frederick explained he could see a large unknown aircraft with 4 bright landing lights. He explained the aircraft approached him from the east, and at first thought it was another pilot playing around with him, which, for the record, during flight seems like a terrible time for someone to play a prank, but then he went on to explain that the mysterious aircraft was orbiting him and that it had a green light on it. When Air Traffic Control tried to get further details and asked what kind of an aircraft it was, Frederick responded by saying, quote, "It's not an aircraft." After this, his radio transmission was interrupted by a metallic scraping sound, and this is when all contact was lost. Sea and air search begun, but to no avail. There have been speculations that don't involve alien abduction, such as a staged disappearance, the possibility of Frederick getting confused and flying upside down, and potentially even him taking his own life, but all of these theories have been debunked in some kind of a way, and neither the aircraft or Frederick himself have ever been found. The reason why alien abduction has been the main theory in this case is due to the fact that there were many reported UFO sightings on the same night in the same region as his disappearance. It of course leaves us with more questions than answers, but it's all very interesting and very mysterious. In our number 2 spot today, we have Oumuamua. I think I said that right, but honestly, every time I say this, somebody tells me I say it wrong, so you know what? I don't know, man. I don't speak alien. This is one piece of evidence that actually has scientists fighting over what is going on with it. A few years ago, scientists all agreed that we had found an object that was flying through our solar system, and they called it Oumuamua, or however you want to say that, and it was widely agreed that it was an interstellar comet that had swung out from around another star. But upon closer examination, they realized that something was propelling it and causing it to accelerate, and this is when the debate started, because they just don't really know why. A.V. Loeb, who's a Harvard University astrophysicist, proposed the idea that rather than a comet, this could be an alien probe that is being pushed by a light sail, which is a very wide but extremely thin piece of material that accelerates by being pushed by solar radiation. Other scientists didn't agree with this and instead said that it's possible that hydrogen ice could have melted off of the object in a way that would mimic a rocket engine or something of that nature, but in August a couple years ago, AV wrote a study that hydrogen ice is too easily heated and it would have melted off long before it reached our solar system. I guess this is all to say that we just have to wait it out while the scientists debate and gather more evidence to really know what's going on behind this one. In our number 1 spot today, we have radio signals. Alright, basically we're getting radio signals from somewhere, but we just aren't quite sure what exactly is going on there. It started in 2007 when we began getting what are called fast radio bursts, and they are a totally mysterious phenomena to scientists. These bursts are only a few milliseconds long, but they emit emit more energy than the sun does in 24 hours, which is just a statement that my brain struggles to comprehend. All of this is already super cool and interesting, but here's an even crazier thing about them. The main thing we know about these bursts is that they are coming from outside of the Milky Way. They're coming from outside of our own galaxy. Space is cool, but it's also terrifying. This obviously has led a lot of experts to believe that it could be coming from an advanced civilization that is quite far away, and they may be trying to contact us, but we just don't have the technology to interpret the signals. Maybe one day scientists will figure out a way to accept whatever message it is they are trying to send, or maybe one day we'll get a visit from one of them and they'll be mad at us for not answering their messages. I don't know, it's all super cool and incredibly interesting.
Number 10. The FBI files on Bigfoot. Yeah, let's talk about those. Why not? Because they exist, apparently. Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, had all of his FBI files released in response to the Freedom of Information Act back in 2019. The files contained correspondence between the FBI and individuals who claimed to have evidence or sightings of Bigfoot from the 1970s all the way to the 1990s. The FBI conducted a limited analysis on some of these items submitted, including hair and tissue samples. We got some Bigfoot DNA. He's walking by, scratching, and we found a hair or two. They ultimately concluded that the samples were of no scientific value, but they're still files, which is terrifying. The files also contain internal memos discussing how to respond to calls about Bigfoot, but overall, the FBI's involvement with the creature was sadly quite minimal. I know, I want him to be real too. I really want him to exist. He'd be funny to bump into on the street with that goofy walk. He has a powerful stride, Bigfoot. He has like those, it's all in the quads for him, for sure. Number 9, Full House. During World War II, the United States and Britain, they would secretly create these maps, tiny little maps, these cheat sheets almost, that could help prisoners of war escape from German camps. Now these maps were then printed on thin paper and disguised as regular playing cards. How badass is that? The cards were designed so that they could be peeled apart to then reveal a detailed map of a specific area that would help prisoners navigate safely away. Anywhere else is great. The decks were often given to prisoners by aid organizations or distributed by covert operatives, which I gotta say, what a scary job that would be. That's like some Inglourious Bastards type stress right there. Playing cards, dealing them out to the right people, that is so brave. Oh my gosh. The fear of being caught, I couldn't even imagine. The plan was successful in helping many prisoners escape, and it's considered a remarkable example of resourcefulness and bravery on all ends during a time of war. That's, again, I can't even shuffle cards, let alone do this. Are you kidding me? Number 8, Project Seesaw. In the 1960s, the US military explored the possibility of weaponizing lightning as part of a program called, you guessed it, Project Seesaw. Yeah, weaponizing lightning, like they're Thor, I guess. The goal was to use rockets to inject chemicals into thunderstorms, triggering lightning strikes that could then be directed towards enemy targets with thin wires. Now, it sounds insane. It definitely was. Didn't quite work out. The project was ultimately, thankfully, abandoned due to technical and logistical challenges. Yeah, you can't predict where a lightning strike's gonna happen, and the difficulty of accurately targeting them as well. It's not gonna work out. We're not Tony Stark. We're not doing the Avengers weaponry stuff. There was also concerns about the potential environmental impact of the program. Can't just send shit into clouds, guys. Despite its failure, Project Seesaw remains an example of how far humans will go in the name of warfare. Weaponized lightning? Listen to yourself. Number 7, Iran military dolphins. Back in the 1990s, Iran reportedly began training dolphins for military purposes, which sounds so crazy it's almost funny in a way. I don't know, it reminds me of sharks with laser beams attached to their foreheads. Sounds made up, it sounds insane. These military dolphins are trained for many tasks, including detecting underwater mines, locating enemy divers, and identifying underwater obstacles. Again, kind of hilarious, kind of terrifying. The use of animals in military ops is sadly not new. With dolphins and sea lions, they've been trained before by various countries for harbor defense. However, the program in Iran has not been independently verified, and there is little information available about its current status. So, sleep in fear, I guess. These dolphins are off the radar. They're actually below the radar. Number 6, Nimitz UFO. Back in 2004, a group of US Navy pilots led by Commander David Fravor encountered a unidentified, it was a UFO. Found a UFO in the sky while conducting a training exercise right off the coast of California. This object was dubbed the Tic Tac, apparently displayed advanced capabilities that were unlike any known aircraft ever. In 2017, the Pentagon declassified these videos of the encounter and confirmed that it was part of a larger program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The incident sparked widespread interest and debate about the possibilities of extraterrestrial life existing and the government's role in investigating them. Yeah, what's going on? I don't know, comment down below. Do you believe in aliens? I kind of do. It'd be weird if you didn't, right? All that space out there, we're the only ones. Number 5, Operation Snowbird. I thought losing my phone was bad. Oh boy, here we go. Back in the 60s, a US Air Force plane carrying lots of nuclear materials, it crashed in the Himalayan mountains near the border between India and China. Just the thing you want. The crash site was difficult to access, obviously, where it crashed, and the US government mounted a secret mission codenamed Operation Snowbird. The mission was to recover the materials, ideally. The mission was hampered by the harsh terrain and altitude sickness among the recovery team. It was almost next to impossible. Although some of the plutonium was recovered, thankfully, a significant amount was left behind and still remains missing to this day. Number 4, Big Brother is watching. Even allies of the United States aren't safe here. Thanks to Edward Snowden, at the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the states were spying on Germany, France, Spain, and even themselves. That's fun. The NSA had tapped into 35 phones. They were spying on 35 world leaders, not just random people. World leaders, that's pretty invasive. One of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA after they found out and said that this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. That's a hard quote. That one hits the heart, really. Now, as you hear this, you're thinking, well, hey, Taylor, I'm not a world leader. What's the big deal here? What do I care? Well, it was also reported that the NSA was monitoring phone calls in Spain for the average folk. Apparently, they monitored around 60 million calls in 1 month, randomly, so yeah, world leader or not, better whisper on the phone, better hang up. It's still pretty jarring. Number 3, leaked voters. Back in December 2015, pretty recent, scary, personal information from 191 million voters was all leaked to the public online. Researcher Chris Vickery found this data while conducting a security investigation. Now, Forbes had described Vickery as, dare I say, a good hacker, because they exist. They're called white hat hackers. They find weak spots in security without sabotaging or exploiting them. That's pretty cool. It's like some Tony Stark stuff. That's the Donnie difference right there. They don't ruin the world. 79% of those eligible to vote were the victims here. All their names, addresses, birth dates, phone numbers, and emails, even those stupid emails you had back in the day, you name it. Things you don't want other people finding out was all led to the public. And it was all led out to third parties. We're still unsure who was behind this entire leak. If you have any hints, comment down below. Tag them, right? CSO Online and databreaches.net suggested that the information here more than likely came from software provider called Nation Builder. But CEO Jim Gilliam announced that that was not the case and that they did not create the database. Although, people lie, so who really knows? He conceded that it is possible that some of the information it contains may have come from the data that they make available for free to campaigns. So a third party took it and then ran with it. That's terrifying. It's almost worse than if he leaked it himself. Number 2, WikiLeaks war logs. Oh, this one was pretty big. I definitely remember this going down. In Stockholm, buried around 100 feet below street level, is an old nuclear bunker. Today, it's a facility owned by Swedish internet provider Bahnhof. Now, this is where they keep servers for WikiLeaks. Yeah, pretty important, pretty spooky stuff. Julian Assange, frontrunner of this whole operation, his hard drive is in this bunker. It's stored behind a 2-foot steel door accompanied by numerous backup generators, so it's not going anywhere, and you're definitely not getting in, no way. In October 2010, WikiLeaks actually published Army field reports from earlier, back in 2004. Now, one of the biggest leaks in US history. This report confirmed that there were over 66,000 civilian deaths in the Iraq war logs, out of the 109,000 in total. This leak also suggested that some American troops were classifying civilians as enemies in their statistics, which changes a lot of things, changes a lot of numbers around. Looks not great. These numbers were from 2004 to 2009 alone. It was a big leak. And finally, number 1, hide your money. Putting your money in your mattress sounds a lot safer than, Well, how I'm about to finish. Let's do it. Back in 2016, journalists all over the world were looking into the Panama Papers. Basically, it was a plethora of leaked documents, just a loot bag of all things bad. These all came from a law firm, Mossack Fonseca. Now, the operation here was that the firm would help the super rich hide their money in these offshore tax havens. And before you ask, yes, they got caught, and yes, this whole thing was shut down. In total, there were 140 politicians from 50 countries who were all in on it. They were all busted, including the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, and Iceland's former Prime Minister, Sigmundur David Gunnlaugsson.
Number 10. NSA surveillance. The Washington Post originally uncovered the existence of a National Security Administration and FBI program called PRISM, allowing the agencies to take photos, videos, emails, and even chats from various different servers and internet companies like Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and Apple. Anonymous then leaked 13 documents that they said detailed the specifics of the PRISM program. A statement posted with the leak said, "These documents prove that the NSA is spying on you, and not just Americans. Like we said, this is happening in over 35 countries and done in cooperation with private businesses and intelligence partners worldwide. We bring this to you so that you know just how little rights you have. Your privacy and freedoms are slowly being taken from you, in closed-door meetings, in laws buried in bills, and by people who are supposed to be protecting you." Number 9. Russian leak. 3 Russian entities, the Ministry of Culture of the Russian Federation, the City Administration of Blagoveshchensk, and the Governor's Office of the Tver region all lost hundreds of thousands of emails when the anonymous group hacked them and leaked over 700 gigabytes of data. The emails contain sensitive information like state policies regarding art, cinematography, archives, copyright, cultural heritage, and censorship. The group had also previously said that they managed to shut down Russia's space agency, preventing the country from having the power to spy using satellites, reportedly downloading and deleting confidential files related to the satellite imaging and vehicle monitoring. They also stole 35,000 different files from Russia's central bank, all of this coming as part of an ongoing group effort to get Russia to withdraw from their conflict. Number 8. Police documents. In June of 2020, Anonymous completed Operation Blue Leaks, which involved hacking and releasing a massive amount of police documents. They got information from over 200 different law enforcement agencies and gathered a total of 269 gigabytes of data. The documents included things like phone numbers, banking information, and even alleged crimes. The documents were apparently leaked to provide insight into the strategies and mindset of law enforcement. One person involved saying, "I've seen a few comments about it being unlikely to uncover gross police misconduct, but I think those somewhat miss the point, or at least equate police misconduct solely with illegal behavior. Part of what a lot of the current protests are about is what police do and have done legally. It's the largest published hack of American law enforcement agencies. It provides the closest inside look at the state, local, and federal agencies tasked with protecting the public." Number 7. Canadian centers. After an event took place regarding one of the group's members, Anonymous gained a bit of a vendetta against the Canadian government that led to their targeting. They leaked a high-level federal document that included information about the redevelopment of Canada's key diplomatic centers in Britain, the National Post even confirming it to be authentic. It was marked Confidence of the Queen's Privy Council and included information about the cost of the selling, relocating, and rebuilding of Canada's Foreign Affairs Department in London, but it was mostly focused on the eventual profit that would come about as a result. It raised many alarms within the government and population about just how secure our information is, and what other secrets could be at risk to be easily stolen and published. A spokesperson for Anonymous said that the information was leaked in order to try and influence the federal elections. Number 6. Census Bureau. Back in 2015, Anonymous targeted the United States Census Bureau, their hacking group compromising the data of over 4,000 workers. They did not share how they managed to get the information, but did release it from the databases, including usernames, emails, and phone numbers of government staff. A spokesperson for the Bureau confirmed the attack, saying, "The U.S. Census Bureau is investigating an IT security incident relating to unauthorized access to non-confidential information on an external system that is not part of the Census Bureau internal network. Access to the external system has been restricted while our IT forensics team investigates." Anonymous claims their motivation for the attack was to protest the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade negotiations, which were rumored to potentially lead to the privatization of services in the UK like free healthcare. Number 5. Chilean Army leak. In 2019, the people of Chile started protesting inequality, and things between the protesters and the police force and military quickly started to get violent. This led to Anonymous targeting Chile's military in a large leak of their information and data. The contents of 6 different email accounts and a total of 3,500 emails were hacked and released to the public. The information included things like meetings between army officials and businessmen, contact with foreign security firms, and even cooperation agreements with the United States government. 2 of the most prominent email accounts to be exposed were that of the financial boss and the director of intelligence for the army. All the emails were uploaded to an information distribution center and were made available to be accessed by anyone. After the incident, the Chilean army worked hard to implement further security measures and try to track down those responsible. Number 4. Federal Reserve. In 2013, Super Bowl Sunday was shaken up by not just a football game, but by Anonymous hacking into the American Federal Reserves. They managed to gain access to personal information of government members and banking officials, including their phone numbers, home addresses, email addresses, and passwords of around 4,000 different people. Anonymous apparently did this as part of an ongoing protest against the U.S. Department of Justice. A Federal Reserve spokesperson said, "The Federal Reserve System is aware that information was obtained by exploiting a temporary vulnerability in a website vendor product. The exposure was fixed shortly after discovery and is no longer an issue. This incident did not affect critical operations of the Federal Reserve System." Other attacks that took place as a part of the same protest included the hacking of the website of the United States Sentencing Commission. Number 3. Canadian security leak. There was another attack against the Canadian government that took place just before the first one that I mentioned on this list, all a part of Anonymous's grudge against Canada. These leaked documents revealed information in regards to Canada's spy agency, the CSIS, or Canadian Security Intelligence Service. It shared sensitive information like the size of its network of foreign stations, the volume of secret communications they handle, and their outdated system of information sharing. Before the release, the government had only previously acknowledged 3 foreign stations: Washington, London, and Paris, but a leaked classified document revealed that there were actually over 25, many of them, quote, "located in developing countries and/or unstable environments." Apparently, their security systems had not been updated since the 1980s. A spokesperson for Anonymous saying, "We are now privy to many of Stephen Harper's most cherished secrets," Stephen Harper being the head of the country at the time. Number 2. Operation Hong Kong. Similarly to the situation in Chile, Anonymous's Operation Hong Kong came about as a response to the mistreatment of protesters. In 2014, they announced that they would be launching a massive cyber attack against Chinese government servers and bringing down their websites. An anonymous statement said, "Here's your heads up, prepare for us. Try to stop it. The only success you will have will be taking all your sites offline. China, you cannot stop us. You should have expected us before abusing your power against the citizens of Hong Kong." Throughout October of that year, Anonymous made claims that they had already managed to access many of the country's government websites, and apparently had sensitive emails that they were threatening to release. However, it doesn't look like any of these emails ever actually made it to the public eye. Number 1. Syrian President Leak. In 2012, Anonymous managed to hack into the Syrian Ministry of Presidential Affairs, gaining access to the email accounts of 78 staffers working under the current president. It was apparently a pretty easy job, as it was revealed that the man didn't have a very secure password. 33 of the 78 email accounts all used the password 12345 or 123456. Not exactly Fort Knox. Hundreds of different emails were revealed, including a conversation between the United Nations and the president's media advisor, preparing him for an upcoming interview with Barbara Walters. The year before this, Syria also received the attention of the hacking group when they hacked the Syrian Defense Ministry, changing their website to give a message of support to the Syrian people who were trying to fight back against the control of their president.
Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have the Raven Rock Mountain Complex. The Raven Rock Mountain Complex is a highly secure military installation located in Pennsylvania in the United States, and it is often referred to as the quote underground Pentagon. This facility, also known as Site R, was built during the Cold War as a backup command center for the Pentagon and was designed to ensure continuity of government operations in case of a nuclear attack. The complex is located inside of a mountain and has a vast network of underground tunnels, facilities, and backup power systems to keep the facility running in case of a disaster, and it is even equipped with communication systems, medical facilities, and living quarters to support personnel in the event of an emergency. Basically, it has everything someone would need in the case of the absolute worst case scenario. Although the site was built for the tense times of the Cold War, it is still in use today, but the functions and capabilities of the site remain classified. We know it serves as a critical facility for the US government and military, and that it has been activated as recently as during the 2020 crisis. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. Located in the Cheyenne Mountain Air Force Station near Colorado Springs, Colorado, this complex is a military installation and bunker. It was originally built during the Cold War as a command center for the United States North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, and as a nuclear bomb shelter for its personnel. The complex consists of multiple tunnels and chambers, including the famous blast doors that weigh 25 tons each and can withstand a nuclear blast. It has its own power plant, water supply, air filtration system, and food storage, which is of course all by design to allow for it to sustain its occupants for an extended period in the case of emergency. It has a strategic location and a huge, impressive design, which is why it is regarded as a symbol of the country's preparedness for national security threats. I mean, the thing is even built with a bunch of springs so that none of the buildings will shift more than an inch during all potential types of disaster. That is wild. Like I mentioned, it was built in the Cold War era, but that doesn't mean it's totally out of use now. The purpose of the complex has evolved over the years, and today it still serves as a vital command center for NORAD and other military agencies, and the complex remains an essential part of the United States military infrastructure. In our number 8 spot today, we have Metro 2. During the time where Stalin was in power, it is said that he instructed that an underground secret transport system would be built known as Metro 2. This mysterious underground system is said to connect different administrative institutions, and it's even rumored that it contains apartments and different technical rooms. It's sort of like a secret escape tunnel for high-level officials. Of course, it's completely blocked off to outsiders or to the general public, and while the Moscow Metro administration denies that these tunnels even exist, there was an urban exploration group back in 1994 that claimed to have found the entrance. At this point in time, the existence of only one of the rumored 4 lines has been confirmed, and it is called D6. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Yamantau Mountain Complex. The Yamantau Mountain Complex is a highly secretive and heavily guarded underground facility located in the Ural Mountains of Russia. Its purpose and functions are shrouded in mystery, and the Russian government has actually never officially acknowledged its existence. It is believed to have been built during the Cold War as a nuclear weapons storage facility and command center. There is an above-ground town called Mezgor, and that town is super secret and off limits, so much so that people aren't even allowed within the vicinity of it, and this is all thought to be because this town might be holding the complex underneath it. The underground complex is said to cover an area over 400 square miles with many tunnels and underground facilities, and its exact purpose and current use remains unknown, with various theories and speculations ranging from a bunker for the Russian government and military leaders to a storage facility for advanced weapons and technology. Some have even speculated that it could be used as a launch site for missiles or a secret laboratory for biological weapons research. Despite many attempts by outsiders to uncover the truth about this complex, the Russian government has remained quite tight-lipped, and they maintain strict security measures around the area. In our number 6 spot today, we have Project Iceworm. This is a little different than most of the others on this list, and that is because this is the name of what was once a top-secret, super classified mission. This secret mission took place in the 1960s, and it was basically intended to build a series of mobile nuclear missile launch sites under the Greenland ice sheet, because this would then house medium-range missiles close enough that they would be able to strike targets within the Soviet Union. This project was called Project Iceworm, but there was another project called Camp Century. Basically, Camp Century was to test out Project Iceworm and see how likely it would be and how feasible it would be. So, engineers went to work and created a network of underground tunnels and buildings that included a place to stay, a kitchen, a hall for hanging out, there were supply rooms, and even a communication center and a nuclear power plant. This was all kept as a super secret for a long time and was even kept from the Danish government for 7 years. In 1966, however, the project was cancelled because of the shifting ice. This created unstable conditions for the underground tunnels that are most likely crushed now, but still remain beneath the Arctic. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Svalbard Seed Vault. Deep within a mountain that sits in between Norway and the North Pole sits this vault that is more than 320 feet inside. This vault holds a massive collection of seeds. Like, we're talking about 890,000 different preserved seed samples from nearly every country in the world. The vault that holds these seeds is made to withstand both man-made and natural disasters, and the seeds inside are meant to be kept safe, so in case of some sort of huge disaster, the seeds inside would ensure the continuation of a wide variety of very diverse food options. The door to this vault is only opened a few times a year, and just a few people are allowed inside in order to deliver seeds to the shelves. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center. Wow, just like an easy name to remember. The Mount Weather Emergency Operations Center is a top secret facility located in Virginia in the United States, and it was built during the Cold War to house and protect high-level government officials in the event of a national emergency, such as a nuclear attack. The facility is owned and operated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and is designed to be self-sufficient for up to several months. It is said that this bunker was even put into action after the assassination of President Kennedy. While the facility is primarily intended for use by government officials, it has also been used to provide emergency shelter for other individuals during natural disasters such as hurricanes or earthquakes. Despite being a highly secure location, the facility's existence and purpose have been the subject of public scrutiny and controversy over the years. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Beijing Underground City. The Beijing Underground City, also known as the Beijing Underground Palace, is a vast network of tunnels and underground spaces located beneath the bustling streets of Beijing in China. Originally constructed in the 1960s as a bomb shelter and military command center during, you guessed it, the Cold War, the Underground City has now been transformed into a subterranean network of shopping malls, restaurants, cinemas, and even a skating rink. Covering an area of more than 85,000 square meters, the Underground City is divided into 3 main levels and is connected to the city's subway stations and shopping centers. The tunnels and spaces are lit by fluorescent lights and are climate controlled to provide a very comfortable environment for visitors. Some of the underground attractions include the Beijing Planning Exhibition Hall and the Underground City Commercial Center. Despite its fascinating history and modern amenities, the Beijing Underground City is still largely unknown to many tourists and visitors to the city, making it a hidden gem waiting to be explored. I guess this is one place that is definitely not so secret or mysterious anymore, and it definitely has changed quite vastly since its initial creation. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Greenbrier Bunker. The Greenbrier Bunker, also known as the Greenbrier Hotel Presidential Emergency Facility, is a former top secret underground bunker located beneath the Greenbrier Resort in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. The bunker was built during the Cold War as a secure location for members of the US Congress to gather in the event of a nuclear attack. The bunker was constructed between 1959 and 1962, and it was kept secret from the public until it was exposed by the Washington Post in 1992. The facility included living quarters, meeting rooms, a power plant, a water treatment facility, and even a broadcast broadcast studio to communicate with the outside world. The bunker was maintained until the end of the Cold War in 1992 and was never used for its intended purpose. Today, the bunker is open to the public as a tourist attraction and is managed by the Greenbrier Resort. Visitors can take guided tours of the facility and learn about its history and purpose. But a nice day out with the fam. Here's where we almost had to hide the president. Maybe save the dark history for high school, you know? In our number 1 spot today, we have the Canadian Forces Base North Bay Complex. This complex is a military base located in North Bay, Ontario, which is just north of Toronto. The complex is home to the Canadian Air Defence Sector, which is responsible for the aerospace surveillance and control of Canadian airspace, and it all sits 60 floors underground. CFB North Bay is a critical element of NORAD and the binational Canada-United States Joint Defense Plan. The base monitors and defends Canadian and North American airspace through the use of radar, satellite technology, and other very advanced equipment. Because of its precarious situation in between what was the Soviet Union and the United States, this underground facility was built with safety in mind first. It was designed to withstand an attack 267 times more powerful than the one against Hiroshima. Much information on this site remains quite secret and hidden from the public, but it is said that it remains operational to this day, employing over 1,500 military and civilian personnel. Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the Benton fireworks disaster. This one is like a cover-up within a cover-up. It's a cover-upception, and that is because of the fact that this entire thing happened in an illegal business. Basically, back in 1983, there was a factory explosion in Benton, Texas that claimed the lives of 11 people. This factory was where the illegal business was, and they made illegal fireworks, and their cover-up story for the business was that they were a worm farm. What? A worm farm? I guess I wouldn't necessarily suspect there to be an illegal firework factory at the worm farm, so it's kind of a good disguise. Anyway, the biggest problem with this entire operation is that none of the workers were properly trained or knew how to handle these dangerous chemicals. There was no Walter White in this operation. Like, so much so that one of the workers, who would later testify about what went on there, explained that others at the factory would fill the fireworks with, quote, chemical stuff, and her job was to add liquid glass and defuse. No one is entirely sure what caused the explosion, but there are a couple theories. The leading theory is that, while normally the explosive ingredients were mixed by hand, on this day they might have been trying to mix it with something different, like an electrical appliance. The other theory is based on how there were packs of cigarettes and a lighter found in the debris, so it is possible that someone might have been smoking in the building. Either way, the explosion was so huge that it was felt 20 miles away, and investigators determined the factory to have been the largest and most profitable known illegal fireworks operation in US history. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Burnden Park disaster. This is the name used to refer to one of the worst incidents in all of soccer history, or football history if you want to get really specific. The Burnden Park disaster took place in 1946 when 33 fans died at the stadium one day before the game started. Despite these deaths, the game did start and the players went on and played the game. All the while, these bodies were allegedly just covered up on the sidelines. The thought is pretty horrifying, and it makes you ask, how could this have happened? The thing with this particular game is that it was the first competitive match since World War II, so of course people were excited. So excited that the stadium capacity was 70,000, but 85,000 people showed up. As this surge of people showed up for the game, the crowds began to push through, which led to hundreds of people being injured and the 33 deaths that we already spoke about. Most of the crowd had absolutely no idea what had happened. They didn't know that people had lost their lives, and the players were just told to go ahead and do what they were there to do. This means that while people were laying dead and many more were laying injured, some severely, there were thousands of people who were just completely kept in the dark, and they went on cheering, none the wiser about what had just happened. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Netherlands disaster. Back in the 60s, the Soviet Union had planned to launch Russia's R-16 ballistic missile in July of 1961, but someone had a problem with this. That someone was the commander of the Soviet Strategic Missile Forces, Mitrofan Nedelin, and he thought it would be a grand old idea to push up the launch to November 7th, 1960. It was the anniversary of the Soviet Revolution after all, but of course, rather than anniversaries and celebrations, safety should be at the forefront of something like this. Because of the fact that almost almost an entire year was shaved off of the preparation time to launch, corners ended up being cut. Even with these corners being cut, workers were still scrambling to get everything finished, with work being completed on the day of the actual launch, even after the rocket was fully fueled. But despite the workers' best efforts to get everything ready in time, things ended in disaster. Some kind of an error led to the second stage rocket firing while being tested before the launch. This means that the second stage one was firing directly into the first stage one, which was full of fuel, and the whole thing turned into one enormous explosion. This meant that everyone who was still working and remotely close to the launch were killed. The camera operator was able to remotely activate automatic cameras set around the launching pad, which caught the entire explosion. The footage showed that people near the rocket were incinerated instantly, while those further away either burned or were poisoned by the toxic fuel component vapors. Of course, this is terrible and tragic, but here's where the cover-up comes in. The news of the disaster was suppressed for many years, so much so that the government didn't even acknowledge it until 1989, almost 30 years after the incident occurred. It has been reported that even the families of those who lost their lives were made to keep quiet about the entire thing so as to ensure that there were no news leaks. In fact, they were told to tell people that their loved ones had died in a plane crash. That was how far the government was willing to go in order to cover their tracks on this incident. In our number 7 spot today, we have Operation Tiger. This operation was actually one in a series of large rehearsals for the D-Day invasion of Normandy, which took place in April of 1944. This project went horrifically awry, however, as coordination and communication problems led to there being friendly fire. This led to an Allied convoy that was positioning itself for landing being attacked by E-boats from the Kriegsmarine, which resulted in 749 American servicemen deaths. The terrible happenings don't end here though, because, like I mentioned, this was a part of D-Day and the invasion. This was incredibly secret, so no one reported on it at all, meaning the family members of those killed had no idea. After D-Day, it is even said that then this was an event that was still quite minimally reported on. Many people believe that since those who made the plans for this rehearsal were not expecting any kind of attack or for things to go this way, they tried to keep everything under wraps so as to not be culpable for anything that happened. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Great Mississippi Flood. The Mississippi Flood of 1927 was one of the worst natural disasters of the century, as hundreds of thousands of homes were left destroyed, with even more people being displaced in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana. As a response to this horrible disaster, then Secretary of Commerce Herbert Hoover, along with the Red Cross, began setting up fundraising to restore the over 23,000 square miles of land that had been covered by the flood, and also, of course, to provide a great public image for doing so. Herbert quickly went on to receive this recognition. I mean, he was already looked on quite favorably because of his involvement in providing food to refugees after World War I, so now with this flood, he had a chance to once again save the day, this time in the public eye. This is what led to the huge media campaign that basically showed how devoted Herbert was to helping everybody affected by the flood. You know, the guy wanted to be president, so he wanted to look good, and the Red Cross needed him to look good because they are relying on public donations. And this is what led to everyone covering up what was really going on in these relief efforts. As it turns out, at most of these camps set up for people who were affected by the floods, black people were being held and forced to do hard labor and work on the levees. Only black refugees were being held and kept from escaping while being forced to do this work, threatened with weapons should they refuse, denied enough food, not being given shelter. To understate it, it was an atrocious violation of human rights, and while people were trying to speak up, the great humanitarian campaign was just too loud. This entire ordeal would later come out, unfortunately not early enough however, as Herbert would go on to win the presidency 1 year later. There is a really incredible paper that goes into more detail about this insanely unjust cover-up that is titled "The Red Cross is Not Alright," and it was written by Miles McMurtry for Dartmouth College in 2016, and if you want to learn more, it's really well written and it gives an incredibly comprehensive view over what happened and how it affected the race relations at the time. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Xichang rocket disaster. On February 15th, 1996, an attempt to get a satellite into space went horribly wrong. The communications satellite was made by American company Space Systems/Loral, and the rocket to get it there was the largest launch vehicle ever made in China. This rocket, however, failed shortly after the launch took place, which ended in it crashing into a nearby village. After the accident, a state news agency only reported that the launch had failed, but but there was absolutely no mention of the subsequent crash and explosion. No one was really informed about this at all until 2 weeks later. That is when a more thorough report was revealed, and it not only identified the cause for the failure, but also explained that there were only 6 people who had passed away, and there were 57 injured, but 49 of them had already gone home from the hospital and were recovering totally fine. Here's where things get tricky. There are many people who believe that this number of only officially 6 deaths was way lower than the number in actuality. Western media has speculated that a few dozen to somewhere around 500 people might have actually been killed in the accident, not only because of the village that the rocket crashed into, but also because of the reports that hundreds of people had gathered outside of the center's main gate near the crash site the night before launch. Some authorities and reporters also described seeing dozens of ambulances and many flatbed trucks loaded with what could have been human remains being taken to local hospitals. This has all led to stories of this alleged cover-up. Will we ever know for sure what happened? Only time will tell. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Kishtim disaster. The nuclear disaster that you might not have heard of. This disaster was hidden from the public for decades. In 1957, there were some citizens of the Soviet Union who had the option of living in secured nuclear towns. These citizens were picked and needed to qualify, but the perks seemed great. The citizens of them would have better wages, better healthcare and education, just a better quality of living. But there was the obvious potential danger of living over a nuclear site, like Chelyabinsk 40, which was built on top of a dump for plutonium waste. This of course proved to be a horrible problem when the storage facility exploded. The subsequent cloud full of radioactive material was so large it went on to contaminate the 9,000 square miles around the facility. Despite this clearly huge and lethal explosion, no one was notified of it right away. The people in the surrounding area of course knew that something had happened, especially when the military personnel showed up and they were suddenly being told to kill their farm animals and their crops, but no one was entirely sure what, because no one was informing them of why. This blast affected at least 10,000 people who were all left in the dark for quite some time. In the end, it wasn't until 1979 that the disaster became public knowledge. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Fleet Street phone hacking. This is a scandal that started to unravel back in November of 2005 when Clive Goodman, who is the royal editor at the tabloid News of the World, wrote a story about Prince William and a knee injury he suffered. The thing is though, this knee injury hadn't been publicly revealed, which helped the royal family to quickly realize that someone had hacked into the prince's phone, likely his voicemail, which gave them this private story. Scotland Yard of course got involved, which led to them arresting not only Clive, but also Glenn Mulcair, who was a private investigator for the tabloid. In 2007, they both received jail sentences after they told authorities that they had gathered backdoor codes used by networks and used them to hack into and listen to people's voicemails. This isn't where the story ends, however, because in 2009, The Guardian, who is of course a rival of News of the World, revealed that the parent company of the tabloid, News Group International, had paid out over £1 million to settle lawsuits that might reveal the real depth of these phone hacks and other data breaches that they used to their advantage. Then another revelation came in 2011 when The Guardian reported that the police uncovered that the phones of over 5,800 people had been hacked by the private investigator. As a result of all of this coming to light, media mogul Rupert Murdoch ended up shutting down News of the World in 2011, and in 2012 he admitted that there was a cover-up to hide all of this, and he publicly apologized for all that went on. In our number 2 spot today, we have Rathergate. Apparently there's a lot of gate scandals, and this is just one of them. Also referred to as the Killian documents controversy, this whole thing started on 60 Minutes too. They were presented by CBS anchor Dan Rather, and the documents were extremely critical of former President George W. Bush's service in the Texas Air National Guard, and the reason it was such a big hit is because the documents were presented less than 2 months before the 2004 election, which of course could negatively impact his run. Later, however, it was revealed that CBS hadn't done enough to authenticate the documents, and that they were actually forged in order to try and push this controversial story of military service. Instead of just coming right out to say it though, apparently CBS stuck to the story and doubled down and claimed the documents were real and that the story was true. Eventually, especially as other news outlets followed up, the story couldn't go on any longer, and CBS was not only forced to cop up to the mistake, but also most of the staff that worked on the show ended up getting fired as well. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Bankyo Dam disaster. Back in 1975, when Typhoon Nina struck, the Bankyo Dam was one of several that couldn't stand the storm. As the typhoon hit, there were 65 5 dams within 3 days that collapsed. It was truly catastrophic, and this left everything headed over to the Bankyo Dam, and despite everything going on, they thought the dam would hold, but of course it didn't. Here's the thing though, not everyone thought it would hold. In fact, hydrologist Chen Xing tried to warn the government that the dam was not being built properly and that it was about to fail. When he tried to ring the alarm, however, he was fired for being problematic. When the dam failed, just like Chen said it would, liters and liters of water washed through the nearest village, absolutely devastating millions of people. Over a week later, 1.1 million people were still trapped. After the disaster, the government remained mostly quiet to the public and didn't allow any media to make reports. And it actually wasn't until 2005 that the official documents were released, because until then they were considered classified state secrets. It is thought that 85,000 people passed soon after the dam broke, and through famine and disease afterwards, a total of 230,000 lives were lost. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have the Teapot Dome scandal. Ah yes, what's a list of cover-ups without a good old story of bribery? Albert Fall was the Secretary of the Interior to former President Warren G. Harding, and while in this position, he decided to secretly allow oil companies to tap into the Teapot Dome oil reserve in Wyoming and the Elk Hills oil reserve in California. Of course, the reason he did it is because he could make a ton of extra money doing this, like several $100,000. This all started to unravel though in 1922 when there was an expose that revealed the oil had been sold without any sort of competitive bidding. After this expose, Robert La Follette, who is a senator in Wisconsin, created an investigation into this story by the Senate Committee on Public Lands. The Attorney General at the time, Harry Dowdy, began to get some flack for not investigating this alleged corruption, so Harry turned to the FBI director to help him out. The FBI director, William J. Burns, sent an agent to Robert, the senator from Wisconsin's, office to search for anything that could have been used to blackmail him into stopping the investigation into the corruption. Despite this seemingly obvious threat, Robert knew this meant that his investigation was going to reveal something serious, which motivated him to continue on with it. In the end, the shady dealings and bribery was revealed, and Albert Fall was officially exposed. This entire ordeal led to him being the first United States cabinet secretary to go to prison. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Dreyfus Affair. In 1984, France's government and their army were in some hot water for a series of scandals that had recently happened when a janitor discovered papers that revealed just another scandal to add to the list. This janitor had found papers in a garbage bin of a German military ambassador that revealed that there was a French officer who had turned against them and who was spying on the Germans. When this came to light, they needed a way out of the mess, so they decided to use a scapegoat, a man named Alfred Dreyfus. Alfred was a Jewish officer in the French army, and they decided to accuse him of this spying and the selling of secrets. His trial was huge in the media, and he ended up being sentenced to life imprisonment on Devil's Island, and really hateful and prejudiced groups used his as an example of a quote-unquote unpatriotic Jewish person. Later, the chief of military intelligence would uncover evidence that proved who the real spying culprit was, but when this happened, the chief of military intelligence was removed from his position by his superiors to try and keep the secret from getting out. It is said that French authorities tried to suppress these accusations, but a novelist named Émile Zola continued to accuse the army of a cover-up. People were torn at this point. Some people swear that Alfred was still to blame, while others were convinced he was innocent. In the end, the fight became more about principle rather than whether or not Alfred was really innocent or not. There were 12 years of controversy surrounding this case until Major Hubert Joseph Henry ended up admitting to forging the key documents before taking his own life. The case was finally reopened, and while Alfred was found guilty again, he soon received a pardon from the president. A few years after this, a civilian court of appeals found Alfred innocent, and he went on to have quite an army career, and he even fought with honor in the First World War. This was a scandal that really did change French politics forever. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Ford Pinto. Introduced in 1971, the Ford Pinto would go on to become the car with the worst safety reputation, but of course, not without an attempt to cover up all of the flaws first. During the car's development, during the final stages, there was crash testing being conducted, and this is when designers found out a flaw with the car. Basically, through their tests, they found that the fuel tank's filler neck had a tendency to be torn away, which would then spill gasoline under the car, as well as the fact that the tank itself was able to be easily punctured by nearby bolts. To fix this issue, it would have cost about $11 per car, but instead of spending that money, they decided to just do nothing. Yeah, they just said F it and figured that it would cost less to pay off the people who bought the car and had the issues that caused their car to catch fire. Sounds absolutely insane, and thankfully, an investigative reporter by the name of Mark Dowie thought so too. He went through a ton of paperwork that lay in the US Department of Transportation's file cabinets, and this is when he found what he was looking for: a memo where the company calculated that settling the lawsuits brought against them would save the company $70 million, rather than just installing the new parts and fixing the issue for everybody's safety and well-being. Mark wrote an expose on the story, and once published, a jury in Orange County, California awarded $125 million in damages to a man who'd been injured in a Pinto that caught fire. The ruling was later reduced to just $3 million, but it did kickstart the end of the car and the beginning of the scrutiny that the company would face. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Prohibition poisoning. You probably already know about the Prohibition era, but if not, this was a time period where there were restrictions placed on the consumption of alcohol, which was done with a ban being placed on the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcohol by the US government, and this lasted from 1920 to 1933. In knowing about the Prohibition comes the knowledge that this ban certainly did not stop people from producing or consuming alcohol, it was just done in sneakier ways. The black market for alcohol was booming as people began to drink redistilled industrial alcohol instead. This is all pretty well known, but one super sketchy thing that is definitely less well known is something that government agencies did to curb the black market sales of alcohol. Basically, they poisoned the industrial alcohol that was being repurposed for drinking, and not just poisoned in a way where the drinker would get sick, which is already horrendous enough, but they poisoned the alcohol with lethal chemicals. It is thought that by the time the Prohibition ended, at least 10,000 people died from this. This event is still one of the strangest and deadliest decisions made by government officials. In our number 6 spot today, we have the health risk denial. In this day and age, everyone knows that smoking cigarettes isn't great for your health, but back in the day, people didn't know, and the tobacco industry did everything they could to make sure that they never found out. In 1950, a physician and epidemiologist, Dr. Ernest Winder, published a study in the Journal of the American Medical Association that pointed out the links between cigarette smoking and lung cancer. This is something that is well known and studied now, but at the time, this was news to much of the public, and to hide it, 6 major cigarette companies began to fund their own research efforts in response to the study. The study wasn't aimed at actually getting to the bottom of the health risks, it was just a research project meant for publicity reasons. In reality, they already knew about the health hazards and that there was a possible link to cancer. In a 1953 survey of scientific literature, a man named Cloud Teague, who was a chemist for R.J. Reynolds Tobacco, concluded that, quote, studies of clinical data tend to confirm a link between the heavy use of cigarettes and lung cancer. A scientist for a major tobacco company at the time knew and had studied the links, and they were still trying to cloud the public perception of this huge issue. The entire strategy was later revealed in a 1972 industry memo, which described it as, quote, creating doubt about the health charge without actually denying it. Finally, this madness was brought to an end, sort of, when the attorney generals from 46 states joined together in one massive lawsuit against the tobacco industry. As a result of this, while they can continue to make their harmful product, in 1998 the companies agreed to pay $10 billion annually to make up for the damage that they had done. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Chernobyl disaster. In April of 1986, crew members of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine were running a test to see how long a reactor's turbines would continue to supply power in the event of an electrical power outage. This test, however, went famously wrong due to a malfunction caused by a power surge. This caused overheating of the water inside of the reactor, which released a buildup of steam and thus explosions. These explosions caused radioactive debris and gas to be released into the atmosphere for the following 10 days. The story of Chernobyl is famous now, as it is one of the largest nuclear disasters in history. There were immediate deaths and more that followed shortly after, but there also has been a countless number of effects seen throughout the years it's been, and the area still remains dangerous due to the contamination. Despite the magnitude of the disaster, however, Soviet officials, because at the time Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union, they didn't publicly admit admit that the accident had happened at all. For 2 days, they kept totally quiet about this extremely dangerous thing, and it only came out when Swedish officials rang the alarm bells as they had found increased levels of radiation that had drifted 1,000 kilometers westwards over to them. You think at this point they would have just fessed up, but of course not. The Soviet leader at the time, Mikhail Gorbachev, waited 3 weeks before even publicly mentioning the accident. Who knows what level of effect this might have had in a multitude of ways. In our number 4 spot today, we have the safety cover-up. Karen Silkwood was an American chemical technician and a labor union activist who was very vocal and often raised concerns about the corporate practices that related to the health and safety of those working in a nuclear facility. You would think that this is something that all of those working in the field would be concerned about, but apparently not. She worked a job making plutonium pellets and was the first woman on the union's negotiating team, and after she testified to the Atomic Energy Commission about the things she was concerned about, it was discovered that she had plutonium contamination on both herself and in her home. Plutonium isn't an issue outside of the body but can easily be ingested or inhaled, which is when it creates a major problem for humans. Karen was driving to meet with a New York Times journalist and an official of her union's national office after deciding to go public with some of her findings, and the people who saw her right before she left for this meeting saw her with a binder full of documentations of her findings. During her trip in her car there, Karen ended up driving off of the road and striking a culvert, and this accident took her life. Here's where things get really suspicious though. That binder I just mentioned was never found. It was said that Karen had fallen asleep at the wheel and that almost twice the recommended dosage of methaqualone was found in her system, but there were clear skid marks on the road which suggested Karen was trying to get the car back straight on the road, and despite the accident being entirely at the front of the car, there was damage to the back of the car that friends and family say wasn't there before, and paint chips were found which would suggest a car had hit her from behind. To make this whole thing even more suspicious, apparently Karen was receiving death threats before her passing. There have of course been claims of foul play and claims that she was run off the road by another vehicle, but unfortunately with little to no evidence these claims have never been able to be proven for sure. But what is for sure is that whatever really happened to Karen, it seems like a simple accident doesn't cover the full truth. In the end, however, because of everything that went on with Karen, the Department of Energy opened an investigation and ultimately shut down the facility. In the end, although it is so horrible that Karen lost hers, she definitely saved countless others' lives. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Pentagon Papers. In June of 1971, the New York Times published a few different excerpts that were taken from a top secret Department of Defense report that pertained to the United States and their involvement in the Vietnam War from 1945 to 1967. These papers were created as a part of a study by Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, and the reason they were so important and secret is because they revealed that 4 consecutive presidential administrations had lied to and misled both Congress as well as the American people about their involvement in the war. Daniel Ellsberg, who is said to have been a military analyst who opposed the war, leaked these confidential government records, and him as well as the New York Times and the Washington Post all faced criminal charges in court for their efforts to get the papers into public knowledge, but in a turn of events the charges were later dismissed. Not only were these papers important, but the leak was a crucial moment in time because it bred major distrust in the United States government that would only go on to grow. In our number 2 spot today, we have Operation Paperclip. I suppose this is less of a cover-up and more of just a secret operation, but this one was kept a secret not for the safety of the people, but instead to prevent an uproar from the public. This operation began in 1946 when the President of the United States at the time, Harry Truman, authorized it. Basically, the entire point of it was to lure scientists from Germany over to the United States after the Second World War. This was done in an effort to aid the country in their post-war efforts, as well as to ensure that the valuable knowledge these people had would not end up in the hands of perhaps the Soviet Union or either side of the divided East and West Germany. Had it not been classified information at the time, this would have been highly controversial, as many of these people were involved in, and sometimes even leaders of that hateful party we won't mention by name again. Former President Truman stood by his decision, saying that because of the relations with the Soviet Union, quote, "this had to be done and was done." Several of the scientists a part of this program were later investigated because of their former ties, but one was only ever tried out of the over 1,600. None of the paperclip scientists were ever found guilty for any crimes either in the United States or in Germany. Perhaps the most famous of all of the paperclip scientists was Wernher von Braun, who really played a huge role in advancing NASA's Apollo missions. In our number 1 spot today, we have have the Watergate scandal. It's perhaps one of the largest scandals and leaks in history, especially in the history of the United States. In the middle of 1972, there were 5 men who were arrested for breaking into and subsequently trying to bug the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate Hotel complex in Washington, D.C. As the year went on, the 1972 presidential election came closer, and there was an anonymous source who fed information to Washington Post reporters that, quote, the Watergate bugging incident stemmed from a massive campaign of political spying and sabotage conducted on behalf of President Nixon's re-election and directed by officials of the White House. Despite this information leak and it being reported on the news, Nixon was still re-elected, but he was also under serious investigation. There was a series of Senate hearings, and the Senate even went on to create a special investigative committee. The hearings were broadcast nationwide, and they had witnesses testifying that Nixon had approved plans to cover up administration involvement in the break-in, and that there was a voice-activated taping system in the Oval Office. These hearings captured the attention of Americans everywhere for weeks, and in the end, the United States Supreme Court ruled that Nixon had to release these Oval Office tapes to government investigators, which then went on to reveal that he had not only attempted to cover up what went on, but he also later tried to use federal officials to deflect the investigation. Under the threat of an imminent impeachment, Nixon had no choice but to admit his guilt and resign, making him the only president to do so. His successor, Gerald Ford, ended up pardoning him, so he escaped prosecution, but there were 69 other people indicted, with 48 of them later being convicted.
Coming in at number 9 is the pill. This one is sus as hell and was shared by redditor Miriam, whose friends served in Desert Storm. They shared that every morning during muster, the troops were all given a pill to take and were told it would protect them from any and all toxins that the Iranians had released into the air. Might want to check the science on that claim, but moving on. The friend thought the whole thing was doubtful, so he never swallowed the pills, and neither did some of the others. Fast forward a few years later, and he finds out that the people who took the pills now all have various kinds of cancer and other really serious medical issues. The ones that chose not to take the pill are completely fine, so what the hell are in those pills, and why were they being used as guinea pigs? What it be? What it do?
Coming in at number 8, we have the Snowden files. Now, of course, these were leaked on a much more secure website than Reddit. Snowden went to the press to get out all the classified info, but the thing is, I've read all about this on Reddit. It was going gangbusters on there, and you can still go back and check it out. For those of you who don't know, Edward Snowden was working with American intelligence and leaked a ton of info about how the NSA was looking at all your emails, sorting all your phone calls, and they could access all of that info at any time. And frankly, they probably still are. I mean, just talk about something around your phone, like this. Look at this. I need to buy ninja equipment for a ninja school. I need ninja stuff because being a ninja is cool. I want to be a ninja. Discount ninja clothes. I'm gonna get ninja ads now.
Filling at number 7 slot are the Montebello Islands. So during the 1950s, the British government ran 3 nuclear bomb tests at the Montebello Islands, located near the coast of Western Australia. Operation Hurricane occurred on October 3rd, 1952, where 25 kilotons of plutonium were dropped. Then came Operation Mosaic, taking place in the middle of 1956, where 15 kilotons were dropped on Tremio Island and 60 kilotons were dropped on Alpha Island. This really isn't a big deal. Nuclear bomb tests were done so routinely back then, and the islands were uninhabited, so no one was really getting hurt except of course the Aboriginal people that lived there. Their tribes were right on the mainland next to the islands, and they're extra vulnerable to the radioactive fallout, but that wasn't even taken into consideration by the Safety Committee or the Atomic Weapons Research Establishment. There was already huge radioactive fallout all over the mainland. There was even radioactive rain on the coast of Queensland. I just find it funny how the dose levels were ignored when it came to the Aboriginals. Like, oh, we don't care. If they're not white settlers, we just don't care.
At number 6, we have the death of the Challenger pilots. Here's some gruesome details about the Challenger pilots that Cyrax2112 shared on Reddit. He said when the spacecraft exploded, the people on board didn't die right away. Even though the news flying around the world for a long time was as soon as it erupted into a ball of flames, the pilots were killed. Well, that wasn't the case. Apparently, most of the pilots survived the initial explosion and were flying around in the worst terror of their lives as they came crashing down to the planet. On top of this, NASA knew this right from the beginning, but they kept this information a secret. They knew that if they made the crash seem more gruesome than it already was, that it would ruin the space program. And you know what? They were probably right. I mean, the crash was already the worst PR they could have received, and if you pack on news about people suffering before they died, no one would ever want to go to space again.
Coming in at number 5 is Devil Eyes. So back in 2005/2006, the CIA was working on a project dubbed Devil Eyes, and it concerned Osama bin Laden. Their plan was to create a bin Laden action figure and sell it throughout South Asia, but there was a catch. They wanted to make it so when the paint on the figure was heated, it would peel off, revealing this demon-like figure with green eyes, red skin, and black marks underneath. The point was to scare the younger Asian generation and turn public opinion against the real Osama. They're saying it like all the kids in South Asia were like, oh, we love bin Laden. We don't. At all. The project was done with a former Hasbro executive called Donald Levine, who has also been called the father of G.I. Joe toys. In 2014, the CIA admitted the program was real, but that they had cancelled it after only 3 prototypes. But according to Reddit and the Washington Post, and someone who was directly involved, yes, the program was discontinued, but hundreds of figures were still shipped to Karachi, Pakistan. My parents just moved there. Let me see if I can find one of these. I will let you guys know.
Coming in at number 4, we have sterilization. Redditor Ultra Meow wrote on Reddit about government documents that were found which highlighted the sterilization of Native American women without their consent. These were discovered in 1972. Apparently this was a common practice, as the American people were constantly trying to wipe out the Native American population, and to this day have done very little to repair the damage that has been done.
Filling at number 3 slot are the secret archives. So apparently there's this huge secret facility in Britain somewhere that contains all of the British Empire's secret archives. And the British Empire literally colonized and ruined half of the world. Countries that are third world countries today were made that way since during colonization, the Empire literally stripped them of all their value and made them decades behind in terms of progress. Just imagine the horrible secrets this facility must hold. Now, apparently the British committed horrible human rights violations during the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya back in the 50s. The uprising was essentially the local Kenyan tribes versus the colonizers and British army. The secret documents in the facility reveal the extent of torture and death that occurred there, to the point any surviving Mau Mau could get compensation from the crown now if they wanted to. Millions were put in concentration camps, hundreds of thousands were physically and sexually abused, victims were refused medical aid, they were burning people's eardrums with lit cigarettes, like the whole thing was horrible. Sad fact, one of the victims was actually Obama's granddad.
And coming in at the number 2 spot, we have Operation Paperclip. Once again, not a secret that was originally leaked on Reddit, but you can find so much info about it on Reddit, and the first time I read about it was on Reddit, so I thought it would be a good fit. This was one of the wildest government secrets ever. What do you do with the enemy after you defeat them? Do you disband them? Do you kill everyone? Or do you try and take as much of them as possible to try and make your own country stronger? Well, the last option was basically Operation Paperclip. Turns out that after World War II, the Americans wanted to take what they could from the Nazis. Operation Paperclip was when the Americans took somewhere around 1,500 scientists that were working with the Nazis. They had a ton of intel on German weaponry and explosives, and they wanted that data for themselves. I mean, would it have been better to let all that knowledge stay in Germany, or was it better taking them for the benefit of the American people? I don't know, I guess that's a question of morality that'll be floating around for a very long time.
And finally, at number 1 is tracking. So this one's a bit iffy since it wasn't initially leaked on Reddit exclusively, but I found out about it from Reddit exclusively, so I'ma make it count, cause I wrote this video and I can do what I want. Okay, so don't worry, Che wrote his part, I'm not taking all the credit. Anyway, back in March of 2019, NBC7 managed to get their hands on a bunch of documents the US government had created. On it was a secret database of journalists, activists, and influencers who were advocating immigration. In some cases, the database put alerts on these people's passports, but what brought these people under the lens is the migrant caravan at the end of 2018. 5,000 immigrants from Central America entered the US, and as the migrant caravan reached San Diego, they were met by attorneys, journalists, and more. Any journalists that helped any of the migrants or covered the story became targets of intense searches and inspection by border officials. Sounds like my life every time I go to the airport and get randomly checked. Okay, so random. Some advocates even get detained detained for 13 hours, others would be pulled into secondary inspection 4 times. Agents collect information on these people, the data shows their face, their social media, their passport numbers, everything. Homeland Security even said, "We are a criminal investigation agency, we're not an intelligence agency, we can't create dossiers on people and they're creating dossiers. This is an abuse of the Border Search Authority." Wow, I actually agree with them. This is majorly screwed up.
Starting off this countdown, we have the spies. Tons of people are afraid that the government is spying on them. It's thought that they can tap into our phones and watch us and listen to our calls, even though I don't know why they would want to. Like, what are they gonna see me scrolling through like Instagram all day? It's not a pretty sight. Now, we can't really prove that they do, but recently a post on Reddit revealed that they are tracking us. So I don't know if this is a thing outside of Canada, but it is in Canada. So Apple and Android phones now have a COVID-19 sensor on them. Basically, this allows the government to track your every move. A couple of weeks ago, a lot of cell phone users were having phone disruptions, and that's apparently when the tracker was put on the phones. In secret. But it's not on all phones. Once you update your phone, then it's automatically turned on. Don't believe me? Well, the post says that for iPhone users, go to Settings, Privacy, Health, and then you'll see it, but it's not yet functional. For Android users, go to Settings, then Google Settings, and it should be there. This is said to be able to notify you if you've been near someone that has the virus. But it's also a way for the government to track your every move. Seriously, why would they have this feature and then just like not tell us about it? Why is everything done in secrecy? They're up to something. Moving on at number 9, we have Nixon's health. Now, this isn't really classified information, but I thought it was quite interesting, and it was brought to my attention by Kelly, Roy on Reddit. So the files of Richard Nixon's longtime physician, Dr. Walter Tkach, probably said that last name wrong, are on lockdown. The doctor's son has the files and is planning to eventually release them to the Nixon library, but when he does, they will not be open for 75 years. Not only that, but taped conversations between Nixon and his doctor are also on lockdown, and they will not be released. Now, why is this significant? Well, some people believe that Nixon was incapacitated towards the end of his presidency. If so, then under the 25th Amendment, he should have had his authority suspended. So there's a reason why the government has been keeping these files classified. It's going to apparently expose a lot. In our 8th spot, we have the trade documents. Back in 2019, the Reddit account OsterMaxNN leaked a bunch of UK government trade documents. The documents discussed future trade deals between the US and the UK. They also revealed plans by the Conservative Party to privatize National Health Service. After investigation, it turns out that the Reddit user that leaked the documents was part of a larger coordinated effort from Russia. Reddit said, and I quote, "We investigated this account and the accounts connected to it. And today we believe this was part of a campaign that has been reported as originating from Russia." In our 7th spot, we have Area 51. Everyone wants to know what really goes on in Area 51. Is it really where they're keeping aliens? I need to know. But sadly, we don't truly know. But we do have some insider information on what it's like in Area 51. Yeah, you heard me. 8 years ago, a Reddit user by the name of Kiver16 revealed that his mother's boyfriend is Stephen Gorvan, aka one of the people who was at Area 51 testing the Mars rover. He uploaded a picture of Stephen holding a sign saying, "Hi Reddit, ask me anything," as proof that it actually was him and he wasn't just gonna make it up. So people quickly jumped to it, asking him tons of questions on the mysterious base. During one part of the Q&A, Stephen revealed that when he first arrived at the base, he saw a strange aircraft flying low across the desert floor. He believed that it was a test flight for a secret aircraft. He said it moved at subsonic speed and didn't make a lot of noise. He also revealed that Area 51 is much bigger than it looks, with tons of different sectors and buildings. Now sadly, he didn't see any aliens. But he did reveal that it seemed like we are close to hoverboard technology, like the ones you see in Back to the Future, so that's pretty cool. Moving on to number 6, we have DB Cooper. one of the most famous and mysterious cases of all times, and I might have found out what happened to him. But first, let me give a rundown on this dude for the people who have no clue what I'm talking about. Dan Cooper, or D.B. Cooper, is a man who was responsible for a plane hijacking in 1971. No one knows who he is or where he is now. So in 1971, Cooper boarded the plane, and once in the air, he handed the flight attendant a note saying that he had a bomb in his suitcase. He demanded $200,000 and a parachute, but he didn't want any hostages. So they landed in Seattle, he got his request, and then he told the pilot to fly to Mexico City. However, along the way, he took the money and his parachute and jumped out of the plane. The police looked for Cooper until 2016, and this case is known as one of the longest active searches in history. Now, 2 years ago, a former FBI special agent joined Reddit and did a AMA, Ask Me Anything. To prove it was really him, he held a piece of paper like the other dude, saying his name and his Reddit, blah blah blah. The man is Mark Ruskin, who worked 20 years in undercover operations. One of the questions that someone asked him was about D.B. Cooper, and what the FBI thought happened to him and what he thought happened to him. Ready for this? Both the FBI and Mark believe that D.B. Cooper did not survive the parachute down. I know, so anticlimactic, but apparently they have evidence to suggest he didn't make it. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the cat bomb. So this secret isn't really a secret anymore. I guess most of these aren't secrets anymore, but I didn't know this was a thing until I read about it on Reddit, meaning that I bet some of you haven't heard about it either. So during World War II, the government thought it would be a good idea to strap a cat to a bomb. They thought that by doing so, it would assure the bombs would reach their target. Cats hate water, so they thought if you drop a cat strapped to a bomb over water, the cat would avoid the water and then would just land on the battleship's deck. But obviously, for many reasons, that did not work out. Cats would end up passing out midair before sinking without a trace. They also tried something similar with bats, which again, didn't really work. Moving on to number 4, we have the bomb shelter. This is going to come to a shock to anyone who lives outside of the US. Posted on Reddit by the user Deadpool8988, they said that at one point, the US government was telling people to build a bomb shelter in their backyards. They instructed people to dig a big enough hole in their backyard and then cover it with a door. They were told to hide out there in case of a nuclear attack. But turns out that the real reason why they were telling families to do this was so that if there was a nuclear attack, the government wouldn't have to bury as many bodies. So families were literally digging their own graves. That is extremely disturbing. In our 3rd spot, we have the blood supply. Okay, this one is going to be pretty crazy. So back in 1984, the Red Cross Society in Canada was importing blood products from the US. This was at the time of the AIDS crisis, and America was hit much harder with it. There was fear that the disease was going to be transmitted through this blood. But the Red Cross ignored it, and according to this Reddit user who was a lab worker for the American Red Cross, apparently they were aware of this and so was the US government. But they didn't warn Canadians. Instead, they told them they had nothing to worry about and that they tested the blood before sending it. The guy was forced to keep his mouth shut and lie. As a result, tons of hemophiliacs who had blood transfusions later died of AIDS. What's freaky is that the Reddit user that shared this information later deleted his account. I just hope that he's safe and that the government didn't come for him for exposing them. In our 2nd spot, we have the leaked emails. In March 2016, the personal Gmail account of John Podesta, a former White House chief of staff and chair of Hillary Clinton's 2016 US presidential campaign, was hacked, and his emails revealed some very disturbing things. So the emails were posted to Reddit along with other websites, and then users started to decipher them. They believe that Hillary and other people of power are part of a human and a sex ring. In the emails, they use code words like pizza, cheese pizza, and hot dogs. Kinda weird. And it would say things like, and I quote, "I'm dreaming about your hot dog stand in Hawaii." Clearly, there's a hidden message to that. I can't dive into too much detail about it for obvious reasons, but you should do some research of your own. It's crazy. What makes this more suspicious is that the government removed all posts about this from Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, and other social media sites. Any posts about the emails and the theories will be removed. And in our number 1 spot, we have the blue van. Okay, this one thoroughly creeps me out. Like, it just proves that the government is up to no good. So this story was posted on Reddit by a former homicide detective. One time he was called to a scene where the victim had called 911 saying that someone was trying to kill him. He told police that he was hiding in his panic room. When they arrived at his house, there were no signs of forced entry, and all the doors remained locked from the inside. Inside the house, there was no damage, it was just super clean, no signs of violence or anything. Due to this, the detective believed that the attacker was someone that the man knew and invited inside. When they eventually got to the panic room, they found the man sitting on the floor. His face had a terrified expression plastered on it. Both of his arms were missing, not cut off. They looked as if they had been ripped off. His missing limbs were never found. Now, here's where it gets spooky. As soon as they reported their findings, the police captain told the team to give all of the evidence, along with the victim's body, to the individuals in a blue van that had arrived on the scene. The blue van belonged to the government. After they did this, the case was buried. They never heard any more information on it. Like, what? Seems like some government creature got released and killed this guy or something like that, and then they're trying to cover it up.
Starting off this countdown, we have the transmission tests. The US government once ran a series of tests on people with disabilities and prison inmates. They thought that it was fine to do so with this demographic of people because basically they thought they were going nowhere in life and they have nothing to lose. One of the tests in the mid-1940s was quite disgusting. It involved having young men swallow unfiltered stool. They did this to see how a deadly stomach bug was transmitted. The study took place at a reformatory prison, the New York State Vocational Institution. They claimed that they couldn't just spray the germs and have the test subjects breathe it in. No. They said that swallowing it was a more effective way to spread the disease. Of course, these men were forced to do so against their will and were left traumatized. In our 9th spot, we have the malaria tests. In the late 1940s, a group of men were infected with malaria before being starved for 5 days. While being starved, some of them were subjected to hard labor. Those men lost 14 pounds within a few days. They then were treated for their malaria with a number of drugs. What's wild is that this study was always kept a secret. In fact, most studies from the 1940s to 60s were never covered by the media. And if they were, the focus was, oh my god, the government might find a cure, it's amazing the work that they're doing. The focus was never on how they were finding the cure and their poor test subjects. In our 8th spot today, we have the pregnant women. In the late 1940s, a number of researchers were testing diethylstilbestrol, which is a synthetic estrogen, on pregnant women. They thought this would help women against pregnancy complications, but it sadly did the exact opposite. A number of women ended up miscarrying or giving birth to low birth weight babies. None of the women knew that they were being experimented on in the first place. If they had known, they probably wouldn't have risked it. In our 7th spot, we have the syphilis experiment. In the early 1950s, the government controlled a syphilis study on men in Guatemala. Their aim was to find out how syphilis and other diseases spread. Sadly, not much is known about these experiments because the government records were destroyed years after the program was shut down in 1956. What we do know though is that the men were exposed to prostitutes infected with this disease, but they later found that that didn't spread the infections quick enough, so they decided to inject the disease into the men. They did so by 2 ways. One, by making a medicine with this disease and putting it on their downstairs eggplant, or by injecting it directly into their spine. What made this worse is that there were no age restrictions to these tests, so they were targeting the young too. Some declined drastically in health. Plus, a number of test subjects were left untreated so that they could study the progression of the infections as well as the damage it would cause. In our 6th spot, we have the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project is the project that produced the world's first atomic bomb. They conducted a number of tests, including detonating a series of bombs in a New Mexico desert. They also conducted a number of tests on humans.
to see the effects that radiation would have on us. One of the tests included monitoring nuclear technicians for the effects of radiation exposure. The technicians had no clue that they were being studied. Some fell extremely sick. One woman even suffered from kidney failure. That's when the workers began to wonder if they were getting sick from the radiation. Later, more tests were done on humans. This time, they were injected with polonium and other radioactive elements. In the end, hundreds of people ended up being injected or fed with plutonium, which is one of the most dangerous substances in the world. Sadly, they targeted individuals with disabilities. Over 57 children with disabilities and more than 100 adults with disabilities were injected with plutonium against their will. In our third spot, we have mental health experiments. Dr. Robert Heath is quite the controversial figure in history, and that's due to the number of tests that he did on patients with schizophrenia. In the studies funded by the US Army, he would dose the patients with LSD before implanting electrodes into their brain and shocking them. He thought that this would cure all their problems. He also would use this on gay men to try and make them straight. In our second spot, we have the monster experiment. In 1939, psychologist Wendell Johnson and his student Mary Tudor conducted something known as the monster experiment. For this, they used 22 young orphans. Now, the study was all about stuttering. They wanted to see if psychological abuse could induce stuttering in children. And turns out, it did. So for this test, they divided the orphans into two groups. One group, the children were praised and treated humanely. In the other group, they were treated the complete opposite. In the end, the children in the negative group developed stutters that they retained for the rest of their lives. And in our number one spot today, we have This was a state-supported institution for children with intellectual disabilities. And what they did to these students was give them hepatitis in order to track the development of the viral infection. Of course, they were being experimented on without knowledge or consent. To make matters worse, the study lasted 14 years. They also injected them with a number of drugs to see what they would do to their body and the hepatitis. Imagine intentionally making a group of people sick for an experiment. The grossest part is that when the government was exposed for this project, they tried to justify their actions by saying that these people were probably gonna wind up contracting it anyways. In our 6th spot today, we have Operation Popeye. This is another very wild one. Operation Popeye was a highly classified weather modification program during the Vietnam War from 1967 to 1972. You heard me correctly. The government learned how to control the weather. Basically, they wanted to increase rainfall in certain areas to prevent enemies and military supply trucks from being able to travel. In fact, they caused a number of landslides and flooding in that area. Weather manipulation has since been banned from use for military gain. In our 4th spot today, we have Project 112 and Project Shad, or SHAD. Project 112 and Project Shad took place from 1962 to 1973 and involved a number of veterans or military personnel. Basically, both tests involved exposing these people to substances they might want to use in warfare. Nearly 6,000 people were exposed to Coxiella burnetii, which is Q fever, Staphylococco enterotoxin B, which causes food poisoning, and sarin and soman gas. Sarin is a very, very dangerous nerve gas, and soman can cause death in minutes. Both can be fatal if only the tiniest amount gets on the skin. These men had no clue that they were being exposed to this. Moving on to number 3, we have Project Sunshine. This is another very messed up government project. During the 1950s, the US government was using stillborns to conduct radiation tests on. They wanted to determine the effects that radiation would have on humans and how much we could withstand in case of a nuclear fallout. They called this Project Sunshine, and it was anything but rainbows and sunshine. What's sad is that the government was stealing body parts and tissues from morgues without families' consent. It's said that more than 1,500 samples were gathered worldwide. This is incredibly sad and sick.
Number 10, Project Stargate. If you've watched Stranger Things, then this one probably sounds familiar to you. In the show, 11 started off as an experiment to psychically spy on the Russians, and turns out this was actually real. In the 1970s in California and later in Maryland, the CIA recruited numerous men and women who claimed they had ESP, or extrasensory perception. People with ESP typically say that they can read minds or move objects without touching them. They were recruited to try and help uncover military and domestic intelligence secrets. Mostly, they just wanted them to spy on the Russians by reading their minds. The government covered it up, of course, because why would they want people knowing they're trying to use magic powers to win a war? But in 2017, when 12 million pages of records were declassified, all of the information about the so-called Project Stargate became public knowledge. People learning that they had been using the men and women to locate hostages and even track fugitives throughout the states. Number 9, Vault 7. Vault 7 was definitely never meant to make it to the public eye, but unfortunately for the CIA, it got leaked. So what actually is Vault 7? Back in 2017, Wikileaks started releasing a series of CIA documents. Vault 7 was a group of documents that contained hacking systems that were either developed or otherwise obtained by the CIA. For the most part, it should make you wary of your technology and how the government is using it. Many people know that apps will track our searches and data to learn about us and maybe even sell it to malicious companies, but it's much more than that. Weeping Angel has the ability to turn a Samsung television into a recording device, even if it appears that your television is switched off. Vault 7 also contained the ability to intercept all your iPhone messages before they got encrypted through apps like WhatsApp, Signal, and Telegram. And according According to the documents, the CIA can allegedly take over your phone by exploiting vulnerabilities, but Apple has said that they patch these vulnerabilities as soon as they're aware of them. Number 8. Battalion 316. Intelligence Battalion 316 went through a few different names throughout its existence, but it was pretty much always functioning for the same reason. They were an army unit in Honduras that was responsible for carrying out political assassinations, and even kidnapping and causing pain to people who were seen as potential political competition throughout the 1980s. The group received both support and training from the CIA, even receiving their training at United States military bases. They were a military kill squad that definitely wasn't known for being friendly, committing various crimes like terrorism, misogyny, ethnic cleansing, and even so-called crimes against humanity. Their goal to remain in power in Honduras failed, leaving behind a long list of innocent victims. In 1996, members of the US Congress asked President Bill Clinton to release the documentation about the country's involvement with the human rights violations that took place in Honduras, and this is when we learned about the battalion. Number 7. MK Ultra. Let's once again return to the Red Scare and the United States fight against Russians and communism. During the Cold War, they came under the belief that the communists had invented a drug that would allow them to control human minds, and the US wanted a piece of that, starting their own research into the technique under the name Project MK Ultra, trying to find their own mind control substance that could be turned into a weapon. It ran from the 50s to the 60s and led to many unknowing or even unwilling subjects being given illicit substances. The experiments were apparently covertly funded in American universities and research facilities, but it turns out that the experiments also took place in prisons and detention centers in the US, Japan, Germany, and the Philippines. The goal was to destroy the current mind and replace it with something new. Attempts included using electric shocks and illicit substances. For some, the experiments were fatal, and many others had their lives completely changed. Number 6. Operation Cyclone. Operation Cyclone became known as one of the longest and most expensive covert operations taken on by the CIA, costing around $630 million per year for a whole decade. So what was Operation Cyclone, and why was the government pouring so much cash into it? It was an operation that worked to arm and finance militant Islamic groups during the military intervention by the USSR. The goal was to aid anti-Soviet resistances outside of the United States. They gave loans, aircrafts, weapons, and other military assistance to the groups in Afghanistan, costing the United States government billions of dollars for these so-called care packages. Eventually, the Soviets were pushed out of Afghanistan, but conspiracy was still spinning. Many of the weapons ended up being sold in local markets instead of going to the rebels, and some people believe that Osama bin Laden and the Al-Qaeda received assistance from the US military. Number 5. Operation Ajax. In the 1950s, a coup took place in Iran, and the CIA documents about it weren't released until they were pressured to a total 64 years later. As it turns out, the agency played a large role in the coup that led to the end of the current Iranian prime minister, a rise in nationalism, and sour US-Iranian relationships remaining into the 21st century. The motivation was oil. The US and UK wanted Iran's oil, but their new prime minister made it inaccessible to them, so the two countries conspired to overthrow him and get their oil back. The coup seemed to fail, and the CIA sent a message to their base in Iran calling it off, but the CIA officer who received it said, "Nah, we're not done here." So the next day, with crowds allegedly hired by the CIA, the coup, or Operation Ajax, went through and the prime minister was overthrown, the monarchy and oil fields restored in the country, anti-Western sentiment also being restored and growing to new and extreme levels. Number 4. The Five Eyes. Are you familiar with one of the farthest reaching intelligence and espionage agencies in the world? You are probably a part of it and don't even know it. It is the once secret Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance. After World War II, the US and UK came together to create an information sharing alliance as a result of how important communication was for them during the war effort. And in 1956, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand were added to this group. The classification status on these documents was USA, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, eyes only. And that was obviously a bit wordy, so they shortened it down to Five Eyes. It has been operating for 70 years now and is is used for surveillance and sharing classified information between the 5 countries. The alliance was especially important during the Cold War, when the countries shared a lot of information like the location of Soviet weapons in North America. The alliance was kept a secret until documents of the original UK and USA agreement were released back in 2010. Number 3. Operation PB Success. Similarly to Operation Ajax, Operation PB Success was a covert CIA military operation that took place in another country, this time Guatemala. This was another coup that took place only a year after the one in Iran in 1954. At the time, Guatemala had a very new democracy, only being on their second democratically elected president, but the United States saw him as a threat, this being due to his allowance of the Guatemalan Communist Party to act freely and land reform movements that threatened US industries. The CIA then worked through various different plans of action to overthrow the Guatemalan government, including assassination and faking tensions between the country and Honduras. They spread false information, placed anonymous phone calls, and hired anti-communist students to create a fake opposition. Eventually, the president stepped down and their democracy was seen as unfavorable. The United States training that the Guatemalan military now had led to a war lasting decades, tearing apart the country. But PB Success was a success as it worked, and they were able to deny CIA involvement until the documents were released in 1997. Number 2. The Secret War. We're once again fighting communism, this time in Vietnam, but while the Vietnam War was taking place, a smaller secret war was taking place in Laos, attempting to stop communism from spreading to Southeast Asia. The Americans essentially used the countries of Laos and Cambodia to fight their own war against northern Vietnam and communism, using their tribes as their soldiers. While it was clear that the small armies had no hopes of truly winning against northern Vietnam, the United States and the CIA continued on with their fight, devastating the country and peoples of Laos and Cambodia. They came out of the war with their land and lives completely lost and changed, but the CIA wrote it down in their history books as a success, disregarding the country's sacrifice. The CIA's historical retrospective on the situation not being released until many years later. Number 1. Operation Condor. It's the Cold War again, and the United States government are fighting against terrorism, this time under the codename Operation Condor. It was a campaign of political repression and so-called state terror that was backed by the US and CIA. It involved many heinous activities like kidnapping, killings, political espionage, and much more, all taking place throughout South America. The CIA chose to describe it as a cooperative effort by the intelligence/security services of several South American countries to combat terrorism and subversion, but really it was a lot more than that. Condor's key members were Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, and later Brazil. The United States provided them with planning, coordination, technical support, and military training, all routed through the CIA. It led to many military dictatorships and numerous deaths throughout South America. And there is so much detail and information on this one that if you want it, you're just gonna have to look it up for yourself.
In our number 9 spot today, we have Dr. Brian O'Leary. One thing Anonymous mentioned in the video was an apparent quote from Dr. Brian O'Leary, who's a former NASA astronaut and Princeton physics professor. The video stated that he said that there is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been monitoring us for a very long time, and that their appearance is bizarre from any type of traditional materialistic Western point of view, and that these visitors use the technologies of consciousness, they use droids, they use co-rotating magnetic disks for their propulsion systems, which seems to be a common denominator of the UFO phenomenon. I obviously have no idea how I could possibly substantiate these claims, but they certainly are interesting regardless of what you personally believe. This could of course just be nonsense in order to stir up the masses, but it could also be someone who's finally telling us the truth, but we're all just too skeptical at this point to believe it. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of what Dr. O'Leary said. Do you think it's a hunk of baloney, or do you think that he just might be telling the truth? In our number 8 spot today, we have the FBI documents. Around the halfway mark, the person in the anonymous video begins to discuss some sort of FBI documents that are apparently unclassified, just sitting there on the website. The video claims that the documents suggest that we've not only been visited by aliens from space, but also beings from other dimensions. The video does explain revealing that the document didn't originate from within the FBI, but rather from a university department head, but that the FBI treated the document with the utmost importance, which is certainly interesting. It's also very important to note, however, that this document was sent in 1947. I'm not sure if that makes the claims more or less likely or credible, but the timing of it definitely seems important, at least to me. While this is one of those things that you have to draw your own conclusions from, in the video it is mentioned that while we are arguing whether or not supposed UFO or alien sightings have really taken place here on Earth or in space, there are real instances of extraterrestrial beings visiting us, but we're just too focused on the debate to open our eyes and see for ourselves. In our number 7 spot today we have esoteric matters. After the discussion of the FBI documents, there is a claim that these beings that have apparently been visiting us are coming not from a planet as we think of it, but rather some sort of etheric planet that interpenetrates with our own, but that we are unable to perceive. Apparently, if you're a student of esoteric matters, these concepts will make a lot more sense to you, or so this anonymous video claims. Apparently, these alien beings are able to make a conscious decision to enter our plane, and in that same respect, they're also to make a decision to disappear from our view. Apparently, they're visiting us as they are thinking about settling here on our plane, and that they are coming here peacefully. During these visits, they are also said to have technology that would destroy any sort of attack made on them, so it is advised that if they do make themselves visible to us, we do not attack or make them feel threatened. I'm not so sure about this one, but at the end of the day, I am certainly no student of esoteric matters, so maybe it's just something that my brain cannot comprehend with the knowledge I currently have. In our number 5 spot today we have perseverance. A point that was made in the video is something that we are actually now watching happen in real time, and that is the mission to Mars for the Perseverance rover that is currently there digging around in the soil. The video stated that Mars may hold signs of an ancient environment that may have been favorable to microbial life. Well, that is exactly true, and the reason the rover is there at all. The Perseverance rover launched from Earth on July 30th, 2020 and made an incredible and successful landing on Mars on February 18th, 2021. While the rover has provided us with some incredible high-definition photos of the red planet, which truly are incredible to look at, its main objective is to dig around and search for ancient signs of life, collecting rock and soil samples for a possible return to Earth for further research. While Mars' thin atmosphere is unable to shield the planet from the high amounts of radiation coming from space now, it is thought that the atmosphere did once act as a better shield, and that the environment of Mars may have once been a great host for life, which is exactly why this mission is so important. While when the anonymous video was first released, we were still a ways away from the Perseverance mission taking place, it's really cool to see how it has come to fruition, and it's exciting to see the new photos and discoveries that are made each day. In our number 3 spot today we have TRAPPIST-1. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far. One of the things Anonymous mentioned in the video was a nearby star called TRAPPIST-1. The video didn't go into too much detail about this, but I'm here to do that now so we can all know what they were talking about. While TRAPPIST-1 is a star, the revelation that the video spoke about was that this star has an entire solar system of Earth-like planets. This discovery first came in 2017, and upon further research, in 2018 it was revealed that some of the planets just may harbor even more water than Earth does. Some of the planets are a little too close to the star, so the water is more atmospheric water vapor. The ones in the middle have liquid water, like us, and the furthest ones have ice. TRAPPIST-1 is now the most thoroughly known planetary system apart from ours, which is kinda cool. While the anonymous video made it seem like there was a full-blown advanced alien civilization living in this solar system, there still might be potential for some form of microbial life that we just haven't quite found yet. And that is very cool.
Kicking off the list at number 10, nuclear secrets. Today's technology, it's getting faster, it's getting better, it's getting harder, it's getting stronger, right? All the good stuff. I'm learning more from Wordle than I did in high school, okay? But how secure are these study apps? That's the million-dollar question. A year ago, we quickly saw how a flashcard app could expose nuclear secrets. Yeah, this is a big one. Nuclear bases around Europe are housing US troops, and while they're there studying, they're using online flashcard apps to remember complex security codes. Makes a lot of sense. They would use common sites such as Quizlet, Cram, CheckPrep, etc. There was one set of 70 cards, again holding top secret information, titled Study, with an exclamation mark. Study! There we go. Each card contained information regarding live and non-live nuclear weapons. Guys like 6 times 6, 36. Okay, 8 times 8, 64. And that's a nuclear warhead. Okay, I don't know what this flashcard is. That's a nuke. Number 9, Guantanamo files. Back in April 2011, a pretty heavy leak hit the web. And no, it wasn't Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man 3, it wasn't any of that. And no, it wasn't Avengers 1. Wikileaks, who I covered in part 1 of the series, they also released the Guantanamo files, and they exposed the way prisoners were treated in Guantanamo Bay. In total, there were 779 documents that got released, and in said documents, it was discovered that innocent civilians, both from Pakistan and Afghanistan, were both being held there without any charges. It's brutal, there's some shady stuff going on. The age ranges as well for these prisoners go on from very young adult to an 89-year-old. So again, many of these prisoners are being held without any charges, and they're really young and really old, being treated like crap. This is a heavy leak, and in these documents we also see the way these prisoners are treated in detail. The way information was extracted from them was horrible. It was straight up torture. Number 8, off-road vehicles. Where we're going, we don't need roads. We're living in a pretty amazing time, I guess, when it comes to space exploration and travel and stuff. We recently sent off the James Webb Space Telescope to see even more of our universe. We're getting bigger and better. We're going deeper. 2020 was also the year where UFOs were just on the news. But what happens when these two worlds collide? Figuratively speaking, of course. Just over a year ago, an astrophysicist by the name of Eric Davis, he gave this classified briefing to the Defense Department mentioning these off-world vehicles. Secret off-world vehicles. What could he possibly mean by that? I mean the ISS, that is technically an off-world vehicle. Spaceships aren't new, you know what I mean? Well, he added the fact that these off-world vehicles were being made somewhere else as well. Not just, on Earth. Like some space BMW? I don't know. Former Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid is quoted in a Times article saying he believes that crashes of objects of unknown origin may have occurred, and that any recovered materials should be studied. Okay, more than fair. Eric Davis also once produced this report to try and convince the government to invest in time travel and use wormholes to achieve such a task. Yeah, this is the Christopher Nolan segment of the list. This guy knows some stuff, for sure. He actually said he studied these crashed materials, and his conclusion is that there's no way humans could have ever created it. Yeah, I don't know. Alien materials? What do you guys think? Are we hiding alien tech? I think so. Number 7. Weaponized lightning. This whole time I thought Thor worked for the Avengers. Apparently he's working for the CIA. How fun is that? Nice. Back in the late 60s, the scientist, who remains anonymous to this day, always a good sign, well, they figured out how to weaponize and bottle lightning. Can't imagine what. Thor. They were determined to weaponize lightning to create Thor, I guess. That way there was little to no evidence left over after a planned attack. The idea, as crazy as it sounds, is pretty genius. Once it got online, people read it and they're like, oh, this is a good idea. It never made it to its final stages, thankfully, but when Forbes was allowed to release these declassified CIA files, we got a better idea of what was going on in the sky at the time. The plan was to drop these extremely thin metal wires from airplanes or rockets, whatever the case, something flying high in the sky. They would drop a metal fishing line through the clouds and then send many volts of electricity down to an enemy camp or whatever. That would for sure mess up their communications if it had worked. If, again, leaked ideas that never came to fruition. Number 6, spinning cube. Remember when UFO footage was being leaked in 2020? We had Senate hearings and we just didn't care. So many of these UFO documents ended up online from the 2020, alien leak, whatever that was. That was crazy. Some are too strange not to mention, evidently. Especially in a list of government secrets. So of course we're going to talk about some aliens. One of these leaked videos, I can't lie, there's some odd behavior going on here. In this video we see a spinning alien cube almost. Yeah, it was spotted over Missouri and then only a couple hours later it was seen again, but this time 700 miles away. So whatever it was, it's moving quite fast. 44-year-old Matthew Jandeka was minding his own business, hanging out on the porch, when this caught his attention. It was a sunny day and the light reflecting off the cube caught his eye. But a day earlier, another dude, 30-year-old Justin Johnson, saw the exact same thing. He saw it driving home. He saw the light and the reflections also caught his eye in the sky. At first he thought maybe it was a balloon, but the movements were too odd, Maybe it's another drone project. What do we think? Is there cube aliens now? Some geometric aliens coming down? Someone call Shia LaBeouf. We have more cubes. We have space cubes. Number 5. Always listening. I mentioned earlier in part 1 that summit where the United States originally wanted to call out China for cyber attacks, but instead Snowden ended up leaking a PowerPoint training slideshow, and now the tables were all of a sudden turned. Snowden ended up revealing himself as the spy kid on June 12th, and he said that he planned on remaining in Hong Kong until he was kicked out. But in his first press interview since coming out, he informed South China's Morning Post that the NSA was hacking Chinese and Hong Kong computers since way back in 2009. More specifically, Snowden said the NSA hacked the Chinese University of Hong Kong, aka the heart of all internet traffic in Hong Kong. That's pretty eye-opening. It's a lot of stuff. You're seeing a lot of secrets in there. But there's many who see this hack as a good thing, of course. Citizens want to know what their governments are up to. I personally would love to know if the NSA was rummaging through my chats, you know what I mean? So a poll was conducted on June 10th. Turns out 44% of Americans were on board with Snowden's outing, and 42% of Americans say that he's a bad boy. Yeah, 57% were not a fan of the NSA's actions, while 37% were on board. Number 4, friends without benefits. Even allies of the United States aren't safe here. Thanks to Snowden, at the end of October 2013, it was leaked that the states were spying on Germany, France, and Spain. Yeah, the NSA tapped into 35 phones, not just a couple of guys this time around. They were spying on 35 world leaders, one of which was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who called out the NSA right after finding out and said that this act of snooping was just unacceptable between friends. Yeah, she said friends, that's crazy. It's like when you show your buddy a photo on your phone and then they start swiping. You're like, hi, what are you doing? Betrayal, what are you doing? Now, as you hear this, you're thinking, well, I'm not a world leader. I don't care. What's the big deal here? What can going through my phone really do? Well, it was also reported that they were monitoring phone calls in Spain for the average folk. Yeah, just listening in, seeing what your aunt's up to. They monitored around 60 million calls in 1 month. So yeah, world leader or not, I'd be a little concerned. They're listening to your secret recipes. I hope no one's listening to my phone calls. I mean, who makes phone calls anymore, you know? I see a phone call come in and I'm like, If it's important, to leave a message. That's what I say. Even the NSA. Leave a message. Number 3, bird drones. Bird drones is not a new concept by any means, but it's fun. So fun, we gotta talk about it whenever we can. Back in the early 60s, the CIA had this secret program called Project Aquiline, where they used small drones with a low radar cross-section, a little camera almost, all that nice spy gadget stuff. They began working on this back in 1965, believe it or not, and the first prototype was a bit obvious. It was big. It weighed over 100 pounds. It was this massive eagle-looking camera, but the only way to catch it was to fly it into a net, which broke something almost every single test flight. So cut to 2022, yeah, there's probably a drone pigeon out there somewhere watching you. Olivia just did a couple lists on hidden cameras, so birds, drones, I mean probably. Some people think pigeons aren't even real. Some people think pigeons are drones sent by the government to watch us. I don't know. I think pigeons are pigeons. They look like pigeons. They found a hidden camera in a cactus, so sleep in fear, people. Number 2, backup files. When Glenn Greenwald kicked off this whole thing in 2013 with Snowden, it was this massive security breach, of course. Snowden was, of course, in immensely hot water, but he was also ahead of the game right from the start, before even getting caught, before even coming out. Snowden had told Greenwald that if anything crazy were to happen to him in the future, well, he'll just leak even more information. Nice, we love backup files. You got dirt? Well, I got more dirt. Everyone's dirty. If Snowden was unable to access these encrypted documents on one of his 4 laptops, then it was set up to automatically send said private documents to higher ups and keep it going, aka the people directly involved would still stay out of the picture. On top of that, Snowden reminded The Guardian that he has many more secrets to spill, specifically the NSA's surveillance systems. Yeah, this is why you make backups, people. Duly noted, Snowden. I put this backup script in another Google Doc, just in case the NSA comes around. And finally, number 1, Pine Gap. Going to the land down under for this one. Sorry, I said under. Should have said under, but I like it. Australia's fun. Pine Gap is a secret military compound built around the Cold War. It's been described as Australia's Area 51. Australia's Area 51? Area 51? I don't know. I love Australian accents, but I can't do them. I can't do it. I don't like spiders either. All we know of the secret base, this mysterious island, was revealed back in 2013 thanks to, you guessed it, Edward Snowden. This guy releases everything. We need another Snowden to come around. This guy's the OG. Turns out this island is not a resort. In fact, it's actually a satellite surveillance base that runs espionage operations. The NSA uses this facility for global interception, and they also collect internet and telephone communication records. Again, all those secret recipes that you're telling to your aunt, they're listening, they're taking it. They're like, oh, extra garlic, you bet. That makes sense. Back in the 70s, around 400 American families just happened to move to the nearby Alice Springs. Yeah, not a coincidence at all. Just that many families rolling in. Yeah, no government operations. Just, people just decided to move here. What does your husband do? Oh, he surfs the web waves. He surfs the waves. Just the waves. Just that's it. Nothing to do with the web or online. Pine Gap, bring your kids and bathing suit. Have fun. Number 10, spy tools. Back in August 2016, a group named the Shadow Brokers were the talk of the town. How could you not be with a name like that? That name makes them sound like a comic book villain. The Shadow Brokers? What? But check this out. The Shadow Brokers would basically steal cyber weapons from an NSA hacking unit and then proceed to sell them online to the highest bidder. The Shadow Brokers. I can't lie, it's a pretty sick name. The intentions, however, not so rad, not so radical. These tools have been used by many countries and many schemes. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, you name it. These cyber attacks are also no joke. Once the entire city of Baltimore was under quite the cyber attack. I swear to God, the entire city. The 2019 ransomware cyber attack, all connected to said shadow brokers. Yeah, whoever this mysterious group is still remains a mystery. Is it you? If so, click thumbs up on this video. Number 9, hide your bread. Putting your money in your mattress sounds a lot easier than this system, that's for sure. Way less complicated too. Back in 2016, journalists all over the world were looking into what's called the Panama Papers, a plethora of leaked documents. Now these all came from a law firm, Mossack Fonseca. The operation here was that the firm would help the super rich hide their money in these offshore tax havens. And before you ask, yes, they got caught and this whole thing was of course shut down. In total, there were 140 politicians from 50 countries who were all busted, including the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Iceland's former Prime Minister Sigmundur David Gunnlaugsson. Yeah, you're all guilty. And we found out. Just be rich. Just be rich and do the things you have to do when you're rich. Don't hide your money. Number 8, SIM cards. In February 2015, it was reported that Snowden, our good boy Edward Snowden, he provided documents that showed that the NSA and the GCHQ had all hacked into a Dutch company that is responsible for manufacturing and supplying 2 billion SIM cards per year to big names. Names like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, you're probably paying for some of these, you name it, right? While this hack would suggest that the agencies would then now have access to billions of unique encryption keys, which could potentially allow them to bypass wireless providers and monitor both the voice and data transmissions of every user, i.e. us, the company had actually been the target of at least 2 sophisticated intrusions. Again, the only one we know so far, so sleep in fear, that's all I'm saying.
In our number 10 spot, we have Ulysses S. Grant. Apparently, Ulysses is known for being a bit of a badass in his time, but also, what you may not know is that he was actually a bit of a scaredy cat. How relatable. Same, Ulysses. Me too. But honestly, no wonder the government kept that a secret, because if the public knew that he dealt with being afraid of a lot of things, it wouldn't have reassured them that they had a strong, fearless leader running their country. Apparently, he had so many fears, including not being able to look at a single drop of blood. I hope he never had to go to war. Poor guy. Honestly, I feel fate when I see blood too, so I feel very understood right now. In our number 9 spot, we have secret affairs. It is no secret that JFK had an affair with Marilyn Monroe, and Bill Clinton allegedly had his affair, but honestly, let's not be so naive as to think that they are the only ones. Apparently, Lyndon Johnson was allegedly known to be quite the ladies' man within the Oval Office, and for decades there have been rumors of presidents that were also in the closet about their sexuality. But still, most of that is, hush hush, probably because of all the press and attention that would arise if such things were revealed, so makes sense. Also, the more people know about you personally, the more you become vulnerable to judgment and possible dislike, and so remaining somewhat of a mystery in order to control how the public sees you is definitely in every president's best interest. In our number 8 spot, we have President John Quincy Adams. Look, if the presidents become old and incapable of working, or if they turned out to be a little mentally unstable, you're probably not going to know about it. Why? Because in the government's eyes, the less you know, the better. The presidents are just one person, and they probably aren't the only ones that make the decisions, and so from the government's perspective, if you're able to be kept out of the loop, then that's just what they're going to do. Perhaps not right, but what can we do? Which is why it is not surprising to find out that President John Quincy Adams, the US's 6th president, had possibly gone a little crazy while he was in office. Apparently, he believed that the world was hollow, and even helped fund a program that would help drill a hole into the ground to try to contact the mole people and begin trading negotiations. Even in the 1800s, this was known to be a hoax, so no wonder they covered this one up. In our number 7 spot, we have George Washington. As great as he was for the American people, apparently one thing that he kinda sucked at was war. Apparently he was not a good military commander, and when it came to strategy, he lost every major battle that he fought. Apparently once, when he was supposed to capture a French fort, his men accidentally open-fired on a British unit. Oops. His poor commander skills would have probably hindered the public's perception on how he was an exceptional leader, so it was probably best that the public didn't know about this. It makes sense as to why the government protected this secret. He ended up being what some think to be one of the greatest presidents, so that was probably a good decision. In our number 6 spot, we have political clubs. Look, it's no secret that so many presidents and political figures have been tied to clubs and cults and groups, and they have been accused of some pretty unfathomable things. But does that mean every president and political figure is a part of them? Of course not. Regardless, there's no proof, and we can only speculate based on evidence we have, and the evidence is limited. There are pictures, though, of some of the past presidents being a part of specific clubs, such as President Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon on Robbins Island, where there was believed to be a cult-like club on that island at the time. But who knows? That's kind of purely speculation. Regardless, we know that the government will continue to protect these specific clubs and their secrets, and nothing will change in that respect anytime soon. Coming up in our number 5 spot, we have President Roosevelt's secret. This one is purely speculation, but would be insane if it was proven to be true. The story of the attack on Pearl Harbor is known around the world because of how horrendous it was. We have all been told the story of the attack being completely unexpected and the country being blindsided. But there is some speculation as to whether that's the whole story or not. Word on the street is that allegedly President Roosevelt actually cut off trade to Japan, and people say that he allegedly told other countries to not trade with Japan, leaving Japan in a state of panic. The attack was supposedly a response to this decision, and therefore it wouldn't be entirely unexpected if it were proven to be true. Now, America was at war, and the Japanese were technically on the opponent's side, so that decision was probably an attempt to get Japan to change positions. But in any case, crazy stuff if it were true. In our number 4 spot, we have TV programs are.
Allegedly, the initial reason why TV programs were created was with the purpose to be able to program the masses and control the narrative around the war and what was happening in the world. Experiments such as people being shown a train coming at them and the conclusion of their reaction to run away and think it to be real showed the power of imagery and how it can influence our emotions, how it can create real fear. The government knows this, and the government and presidents use this to their advantage, especially the presidents that have the media on their side. Ever wonder why everyone is super uneasy during election time and filled with fear and chaos, and then all of a sudden when the election is done, it all goes away? Make up whatever opinion you like on this, but it is fascinating to observe, and it is almost laughable that we went about calling TV shows TV programs for so long without even realizing what we were saying, but they knew. In our number 3 spot, we have Thomas Jefferson's stage fright. This isn't so much terrifying as it was seemingly terrifying for Jefferson to experience, but apparently Thomas Jefferson was actually allegedly a horrible public speaker and was terrified of it. People believe that perhaps he just had a stuttering problem, but apparently that is the reason as to why throughout his presidency he only gave 2 speeches in total. Lordy, that is quite a secret. I truly wonder how they kept that one a secret. Well, anyways, regardless, he was known for being brilliant and is known for making great improvements to the American society, but who knows? Maybe if that was common knowledge, the public may have been hard on him for it and he might not have done as good of a job. So maybe it's best that we didn't know. In our number 2 spot, we have restricted areas. Okay, this is another obvious one because obviously the governments of the countries of the world are protecting all of the restricted areas in their countries, including the secret presidential hideaways which we know exist. But in any case, there are restricted areas around the world such as secret bunkers for the presidents, but also a whole town called Mercury in Nevada, Area 51 in Nevada, North Base Secret Base in Canada, Menwith Hill Royal Air Force Station in the UK that's leased to the US. So many restricted areas around the world with secrets that I'm sure we can't even imagine. The potential things that lie within these secret places is hard to imagine. I bet you there is just so many things that would blow our minds, and I'm not just talking about secret presidential affairs that I'm sure happen. We're talking aliens, obviously. Coming up at our number 1 spot, we have the Presidential Book of Secrets. Allegedly, there is a book of secrets that has been passed down from US president to US president over the years, and it was revealed in the popular movie National Treasure, one of my personal favorites, not gonna lie. This is a book that is allegedly hidden in the library at the White House, and only the librarian knows of its location, in case, something happens to the president. President Obama hinted at this book being real on a talk show interview once. Some speculate that it was complete sarcasm, but on another occasion, he did say that Donald Trump would learn a series of deep secrets when he got into the office, so that's suspicious. Regardless, if it was real, he's not about to reveal that to us because it's a secret. Duh.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the organic object. Leland Melvin is an American engineer and retired NASA astronaut who served on board the space shuttle Atlantis as a mission specialist. He is an incredibly brilliant man with an incredible resume and possibly has one of the best NASA photos of all time, but it's his expertise and intelligence that really makes this story so unnerving. He claimed that while on a space mission as he was orbiting Earth, which is definitely the coolest beginning for a spooky tale, but also really sets the stage for a multitude of horrifying things that could be about to happen. While he was on this mission, he said he saw a quote alien-like organic object. NASA disputed his claims and said that what he saw was just ice, but I feel like I trust the person who actually saw it with their own eyes. Leland went on to write that whatever he saw was quote translucent, curved, organic looking. I have no explanations to offer, but I will say it certainly is interesting and kind of terrifying, and it only adds more horror to the story when you realize that they tried to cover it up. In our number 9 spot today, we have Levelland. This incident took place in 1957 in Levelland, Texas, and actually was the inspiration for a scene in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In the real-life incident, dozens of citizens from across the city began individually reporting seeing a rocket or strange set of lights or some sort of unidentified object, but that wasn't it. Whatever these citizens were seeing was also reportedly interfering with their vehicles as well. Engines were suddenly just dying out and lights were cutting out. If this happened just 1 or 2 times, this could have been some kind of a really strange coincidence, but it was way too many instances. Something else had to have been at play. The authorities at first thought that the reports reports were a hoax until they too saw the strange lights as they began to investigate. This is where Project Blue Book came in to also investigate, and they came up with quite the conclusion. They claimed that whatever had happened here was simply just a case of an electrical storm and ball lightning that caused the lights in the mechanical malfunctions. That's super reasonable, but the catch with this explanation is that there were no reported thunderstorms in the area that night at all. I'm just saying, something here clearly isn't adding up quite right. In our number 8 spot today, we have the lone survivor. This is an unexplained signal that was first detected in 2003 when astronomers were using a massive telescope in order to re-examine 200 different areas of the sky. I say re-examine because these were areas where there was once a signal that was detected coming from them, and they were taking a look back to see if they could detect the same signal again. During this re-examination, they found all of the signals had disappeared except for one. This signal didn't only stick around, but it actually got stronger. This signal is coming from between the constellations of Pisces and Aries, and the curious thing about this location is that it resides in a place where there are known obvious planets or stars. To make things a little more mysterious, there are scientists who believe that the frequency this signal is in is the frequency alien life would be most likely to use if they were trying to contact us. I have no idea what leads them to that theory, but it felt too interesting to exclude. While there are other possibilities of what these signals are or where they're coming from, it's quite an interesting piece of information and is something that definitely deserves more looking into. In our number 7 spot today, we have the space snake. Dr. Franklin Story Musgrave is an American physician and retired NASA astronaut, and considering how credible he tends to be, despite the absurdities of this story, it makes it hard to pass off as a lie so easily. While he was in space, he claims that he saw something that I don't wish upon anyone, a sort of space snake. He said that he saw an 8-foot-long white snake floating through space. I don't even know what I would do. Probably cry? Probably call Houston? I'm not sure. There are many people who think that this was simply just a detached hose from the spaceship, but Dr. Musgrave remains adamant on what he saw, and to be completely honest, I believe him. Maybe his mind was playing tricks on him. I mean, I don't know what happens in space, but I do find it really hard to believe that this person, who would likely be really familiar with the parts of a spacecraft, mistook a hose for a snake. Also, how would they not notice an 8-foot-long hose missing? Again, I'm certainly no astronaut or scientist or engineer, but it all just seems very strange. In our number 6 spot today, we have the classified report. We're just barely getting into 2023, but already there are some crazy announcements, including one regarding a report that was delivered to Congress from the Director of National Intelligence. Basically, since August of last year, there's been a total of 510 unidentified aerial phenomenon observed in protected airspace or near sensitive facilities. According to the report, 26 of these were described as drones, 163 were labeled as balloons or balloon-like entities, and 6 were described as clutter, whatever that means. This is all fine and well, but the concern sets in when we consider that this leaves 171 sightings unaccounted for, some of which appear to have demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities. It's also important to note that the majority of these sightings are coming directly from Navy and Air Force pilots. Here's the thing. What we know as the public is only a 12-page declassified summary of the actual real secret report that was delivered to Congress. Only time will tell if we ever find out what the rest of the report includes or what will happen with further investigation into the 171 sightings, but hopefully if answers do arise, one day we'll find out. And hey, maybe if they don't, maybe Anonymous will just hack them, and then we'll find out. In our number 5 spot today, we have the lights. Leroy Chiao was the commander of the ISS in 2005, and this is exactly when this strange sighting occurred. It is said that he wasn't the only one who witnessed this, however, as it is said that the entire crew was there to see this really unexplainable occurrence along with him. Basically, it is said that they saw a strange set of lights while up in space. He went out to describe the lights and said that they were in the formation of an upside-down V, and that they ended up just stumbling upon this bizarre situation as the formation flew past them. I'm just gonna say it. I mean, I think it's aliens. I just don't have any other possible explanations, and you're telling me that the whole crew saw it? Not just one person this time, all of them. I swear, nothing will convince me of aliens more than an astronaut's first-hand account. Cause like, it's hard for aliens to come and visit us here on Earth, but like, they're just flying through space? They're like, yeah man, this is what we do too, just on the highway. Okay, sorry, I'm going a little crazy. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Lubbock incident. On August 25th, 1951, in Lubbock, Texas, a group of scientists from Texas Technical College were all hanging out in the backyard of geology professor Dr. W.I. Robinson. They were all chilling, enjoying each other's company, until around 9:20 p.m. when they saw something strange. It was a V-shaped formation of 15 to 30 bluish-green lights passing overhead. They were completely confused over what it could be, but figured that the lights would likely reappear, which they did. About an hour later, the lights reappeared, and at this point, all of these scientists knew that they had witnessed something exceptionally interesting. But what was it? The scientists weren't the only one to witness the lights either. About 350 miles away in Albuquerque, New Mexico, an employee of the Atomic Energy Commission's top secret Sandia Corporation, who had a high-level Q security clearance, had been sitting outside with his wife, quote, gazing at the night sky, commenting on how beautiful it was, when both of them were startled at the sight of a huge airplane flying swiftly and silently over their home. On the aft edge of the wings, there were 6 to 8 pairs of soft, glowing bluish lights. There were more sightings as well, all reporting a similar thing. The group of scientists began investigating, tracking the lights, which they had witnessed 12 more times. They measured the angle of the flights, they tracked the speed, and they attempted, unsuccessfully, to try and measure the UFO's altitude. Here's the deal with this though, the government did end up investigating, but the official explanation for these lights is the most cryptic message I've ever seen. It read, quote, I thought that the professor's lights might have been some kind of birds reflecting the light from mercury vapor streetlights, but I was wrong. They weren't birds. They weren't refracted light, but they weren't spaceships. The lights that the professors saw have been positively identified as a very commonplace and easily explainable natural phenomena. I can't divulge exactly the way the answer was found because it is an interesting story of how a scientist set up complete instrumentation to track down the lights. Telling the story would lead to his identity, and exchange for his story, I promised the man complete anonymity. Despite people claiming that this mystery has been solved, by this explanation, people are left with a lot more questions than answers. You know? It's just some natural phenomena. We're not going to tell you which one though. In our number 3 spot today, we have glowing green. Gordon Cooper is a well-known astronaut after having flown the Mercury 9 and the Gemini 5, and in fact he was the last American to spend time in space alone. But despite all of these exciting accolades, I want to take you back to May 15th, 1963. Here he was sent off into space in a Mercury capsule for a 22-orbit journey around the Earth, and while on this journey he saw something extremely unsettling. A glowing green object that would approach his capsule. During his final orbit, he did tell the tracking station of this object that was quickly approaching his capsule, and they were able to pick up this UFO on their radar, but once Cooper landed, reporters were told that he was not allowed to answer questions regarding this UFO. It's even more interesting considering how Gordon has been a very vocal and firm believer in UFOs, so I have to ask, what do you think this was? In our number 2 spot today, we have the Shag Harbor incident. This UFO encounter is often referred to as Canada's Roswell, so I was shocked that I hadn't heard of it before. Basically, this incident took place on October 4th, 1967, when an unknown object crashed into the water near Shag Harbor, which is a tiny town in Nova Scotia. There were at least 11 people who witnessed this object as it crashed, and many people claim to have heard a whistling sound followed by a loud bang when the crash took place. The witnesses that claimed to have seen the UFO were all doing a bunch of different things at the time. One couple was just sitting on their porch, but 2 witnesses that really get me are a flight pilot and a ship captain. On Air Canada Flight 305, First Officer Robert Ralph pointed out to Captain Pierre Charbonneau that there was something strange out the left side of the aircraft. They reported an object tracking along on a parallel course a few miles away and described it as a brilliantly lit rectangular object with a string of smaller lights trailing the object. Shortly after they first noticed it, there was a large but silent explosion near the unknown object, and then 2 minutes later there was a second explosion, but this one faded to a blue cloud. As for the ship captain, Captain Leo Howard Mercy saw 4 blips on the decorator that were totally stationary. This led to him looking up to the sky, and this is when he saw 4 bright objects sitting in a rectangular formation about 28 kilometers from the vessel's window. He wasn't even the only one who saw it on board. The entire crew of nearly 20 fishermen stood on deck and watched. A man named Laurie Wickens was another one of the witnesses, and he and some friends ended ended up calling the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, because they saw a huge object floating in the Atlantic Ocean about 1,000 feet offshore. This is all super weird, and not only the RCMP, but also the Royal Canadian Navy and the Royal Canadian Air Force became involved in the investigation, but nothing was ever recovered or found. But it was also revealed that all commercial, private, and military aircrafts along the eastern seaboard were accounted for. So what could all of these witnesses have seen? Since they never officially identified what it was, in the official Government of Canada documents it is listed as a UFO. In our number 1 spot today we have the 2021 UFO. On February 21st of 2021, a blogger was using a radio scanner to try and pick up the feed from an aircraft when he received much more than he ever expected. He intercepted the transmission of the wrong aircraft, but at the right time. As an American Airlines flight was headed from Cincinnati to Phoenix around 1:19 p.m., the pilot came on the radio to ask the question, "Do you have any targets up here? We just had something go right over top of us." After this, he followed up with, quote, "I hate to say this, but it looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast right over top of us." Not only were FAA air traffic controllers not able to see any object in the area on the radar scope, but they still have been unable to identify exactly what it could have been. This does happen more often than any of us really know, and it is possible that the object could have been a part of some covert military or navy operation, but it certainly raises some alarm bells that it was unable to be tracked in any sort of capacity. I wonder if this is one of these stories that will remain a mystery, or if one day we'll get some sort of answers as to what exactly happened here. In our number 8 spot today we have cyanobacteria. For around 2 decades, Dr. Richard Hoover has been studying meteorites that were found in Antarctica, and in 2011 he claimed that he and his team had found evidence of ancient bacteria from colonies that thrived on comets, moons, and other planets. The astrobiologist said that they were able to make this discovery through the use of the most advanced microscanning technology in the entire world. Dr. Hoover sliced open these meteorites and discovered what they call the remains of cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae. This type of algae is said to have a unique quality and the ability to thrive even in some of the harshest conditions, which is necessary when talking about surviving the extreme environment some other planets hold, as well as just space in general. Dr. Hoover said that while some of the bacteria he had found was similar to those on Earth, he said that some of the others were completely alien. He said, quote, "Neither I nor other experts who have seen the evidence have any idea what these creatures might be. I believe these findings indicate that life is not restricted to Earth, but is broadly distributed even outside our solar system." In our number 7 spot today we have the FBI documents. One self-proclaimed member of Anonymous took to the internet to discuss some important FBI documents that are apparently unclassified, just sitting there on the website waiting for people to take a look at their contents. The video claims that the document suggests that we've not only been visited by aliens from space, but also beings from other dimensions. The video does explain that the document didn't originate from within the FBI and rather from a university head, but that the FBI treated the document with the utmost importance, which is certainly interesting. It is also very important to note, however, that this document was sent in 1947. Not sure if that makes the claims more or less likely or credible, but the timing of it definitely seems important, at least to me. While this is one of the things that you have to draw your own conclusions from, in the video it is mentioned that while we are arguing whether or not supposed UFO or alien sightings have really taken place here on Earth or in space, there are real instances of extraterrestrial beings visiting us, but we're just too focused on the debate to open our eyes and see for ourselves. In our number 6 spot today we have the light shifts. In the latter half of 2015, a Penn State astronomer named Jason Wright explained that there were pretty erratic and spontaneous shifts in the light that was coming from a newly discovered star. The star sits about 1,280 light years away from us on Earth, and these shifts were very similar to as if something was passing in front of our view of the star briefly before passing through. Scientists weren't able to connect this to any exoplanets or anything like that, which we could understand, and this is what led Jason to quite an interesting theory. He stated that it is possible that the shifts are caused by massive objects passing in front of the star in a kind of orbit, like an array of massive satellites or a similar kind of structure, like the type of thing that could be produced by an intelligent and civilized life form. Again, like many things, it's just a theory, but a very compelling one at that. In our number 5 spot today we have the 2023 sighting. The sign of alien life is in the form of a video, and this video was taken very recently on January 22nd this year, 2023. The video was posted to Reddit by a user called MaxKeller96, and with the video they gave some context. Quote, "My sister, dad, and I were out hiking near Picket Post when one of us noticed something glimmering near the mountain, so we stopped to look at it. All I could really make out is that it was a small bright dot in the sky. After a good 15 seconds of staring at it just silently hanging in the air trying to figure out WTF it was, I started recording. Sorry it's shaky AF, I could barely see my phone screen and was trying to get a good look at it with my own eyes. It then dropped 2 flare looking things, though my sister swears she counted at least 3, and then it instantly sped off, heading southish. Up until that point I thought it might have been a helicopter or a drone, as there's a lot of military Air Force base stuff out here, but there is no effing way anything can accelerate that fast. We all lost sight of it nearly instantly after the video cuts, and we were all properly freaked the F out about it. I've replayed the video probably 100 times and tried showing it to everyone I know, and no one had any idea what it could be other than a super high-end drone. If you think you know, please let me know." After watching the video also probably 100 times, I can definitely say that I had no idea what they saw that day, because I also really don't think it's a drone. Also, I just have to say that this video even gathered people together on Reddit. And that's no easy feat. Redditors are ruthless and often very skeptical, and still people are pretty on board and confused over what this could have been. In our number 4 spot today we have the etheric planet. There is a claim that not only have we been visited by some sort of extraterrestrial beings, but that these beings that have apparently been visiting us are coming not from a planet as we think of it, but rather some sort of etheric planet that interpenetrates with our own, but we're just unable to perceive. Apparently, if you're a student of esoteric matters, these concepts will make a lot more sense to you, or so this anonymous video claims. These alien beings are apparently able to make a conscious decision to enter our plane, and in that same respect they are able to make a decision to disappear from our view. They are visiting us as they are thinking about settling here on our plane, and that they are coming here peacefully. During these visits they are also said to have technology that would destroy any sort of attack made on them, so it is advised that if they make themselves visible to us, we do not attack or make them feel threatened. I'm not so sure about this one, but at the end of the day I am certainly no student of esoteric matters, so maybe it's just something that my brain cannot comprehend with the knowledge I currently have, you know? I'm on one plane, I gotta get on another level.